Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists. There is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, so you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, says no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning on another sweltering hot day. A very good morning to you here from the Talk, the home of common sense, from me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Absolute pleasure to have your company. As I said to Mike, I only came in for the aircon. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have you join us. With you live all the way until 1 o'clock. And wow, have we got a rip-roaring show for you. A lot happening at home and a lot happening abroad. Well, let's start with abroad because Donald Trump has approved a plan to attack Iran, we understand, but is yet to give a final order. Apparently he makes his decisions, he says, just like a second beforehand. So when we don't know, it's because he doesn't know either, but White House officials have confirmed that. Sources say the president was waiting to see if Iran would concede to a last-minute deal to end its nuclear programme before moving forward with attack plans. Big issues, though, over whether or not the UK joins in with the US in any attack, giving permission for US jets to use the Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands. Funny how those just keep on coming up, those Chagos Islands, don't they? And whether or not that would be illegal under international law, which is what apparently our Attorney General has told the Prime Minister. We'll talk about all of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Plus, benefits. Well, a benefits reform plan was published by Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, yesterday, and spending on sickness benefits is set to jump by, wait for it, £18 billion a year to £70 billion by the next election if nothing is done to trim the bill and to reform it. The increase alone is more than Britain's entire police budget. But the number of people claiming disability benefits of some sort in Britain will jump by 750,000, 750,000 people over the next 5 years, despite Keir Starmer's promise to reform welfare. And even if they do get their reform measures through, it will just save £5 billion a year. So it's going to go up massively, but just not by quite as much as it was going up. This is unsustainable. Well, we're also going to be talking about those two breakthrough Alzheimer's drugs which have been deemed far too expensive for too little benefit to be offered on the NHS. That's the decision by NICE. Medicines are the first to slow the disease, which may give people extra time living independently. But don't worry, if you're overweight, we'll give you a free fat jab. Does that make sense to you? We'll talk about that. And students should be ready to be shocked and offended at university, according to the Office for Students, which regulates universities. It comes as the Office published guidance for universities, very detailed guidance in England, on how a new law designed to protect free speech will work when it comes into force from August. Yes, students, man up. Don't forget also, if you miss anything on the show, you can go to my YouTube page. It's cunningly called, so it's easy to find, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Have a look on that, hit subscribe, and you will never miss a thing. Well, who never misses a Thursday is Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, who joins us in a, I've got to be honest with you, even with the air conditioning, a swelteringly hot studio. Even the aircon in this building has given up the ghost. Good morning to you, Philip.
Good morning. Yeah, nothing's happening in the world at the minute, so I don't know what we're going to talk about today.
No. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll just go to a break.
Well, yes.
let's play a track.
More competitions.
Yeah, more competitions. Let's go to the weather update. Let's face it, it's all we're talking about.
Yes.
I have to say, before we get to World Affairs, I was on a very, very, very busy train this morning the way into work. It really was one of those where you're thinking, I hope everyone's got deodorant on, because we're all squashed up against each other. And then guess what? At that point, when you're all squashed up, and each time more people get on, they're not getting off. What do you think the best thing is that could possibly happen at that point when you're on a crowded train in the morning?
Go on.
2 American women get on. Oh, I know. Like, oh my God. Like, it's just like that. I turned to the man next to me and said, this is what this train needed. Yes. 2 Americans. No offence, my good, lovely friends, but really, indoor voices.
Indoor entertainment voices. And not paid for by TfL.
Yeah, don't. But then, anyway, let's talk about important things. I want to talk about benefits in a moment, and the grooming gangs and all of this. But let's talk about the small matter of, World War III. We understand from White House sources that Donald Trump has approved an attack plan on Iran. He's yet to give a final order. He said, I have ideas on what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due. Which is an interesting policy. He goes, I don't know yet that I'm going to even do it. I may do it, I may not do it. Nobody knows what I'm going to do, including Donald Trump, I would say, in this. I can tell you this, Iran's got a lot of trouble and they want to negotiate. Now, this is very much different from the stance that certainly other world leaders thought he was taking at the G7 summit. And yes, Macron and Starmer thinking he'd going back to the White House to try and negotiate. Talk about the Iranians coming to the White House. I'm not sure I'd have the Iranian leadership in the White House. The chances of someone having an explosive inside their body being a bit too high for my liking if I were American security detail. Do you think, A, that Donald Trump will order an attack on Iran alongside Israel? And do you think, B, they should?
A, probably. B, yes. What Donald Trump's saying at the minute, he's saying he's finally made a decision. He made a decision weeks ago. This takes a long time to plan and get all the assets moving, and the assets have been moving across from the Atlantic into the UK and the Middle East for a few days now. He makes a decision at last minute. His team will be producing what's called a go-no-go brief, and therefore they'll have set a series of conditions to say, if this happens and this happens and this happens, we go. If this happens and this happens and this happens, we don't. And if it's a mix between the two, that's when a decision will be made. And yes, he will make the decision, so it'll be 1 second he doesn't know, the next second he's made a decision. Yeah. So he's accurate in doing that. But all the plans are there, everything's there, and it's all been carefully worked out. There are a number of issues with the options that they're looking at, and that's what will be causing delays. But also Donald Trump has given the Iranians an opportunity to come and do a deal, as he likes to say.
There was the 60 days. The Israeli attack 7 days ago now was on the 61st day. And he still said you can come and negotiate, but we need unconditional surrender.
This is where he's getting the Iranian psychology wrong. He's thinking of things from Donald Trump deal perspective,
this is the problem.
Not the Iranians' perspective. They're never going to come and give in.
Here's the thing. You don't negotiate with a mad axe murderer saying, I'm going to kill you all who's outside your door. You know what you do? You go... and you shoot him dead. Yeah. I don't understand. There is this Western urge that, it's very much a Labour. It's more of a Democrat side of things. Yeah. I'm quite surprised by Donald Trump on this. But, he did, like every American president, get elected on an isolationist ticket. Every American president elected on that. And it never ends up working out that well. Even when they try to be isolationist, like Obama, look what happened in Syria. Well done, Obama. That worked out really well, didn't it? They saw the rise of ISIS and goodness knows what. But at the end of the day, it's like Israel is our ally, US and UK ally in the Middle East. Israel, it's very clear to me. I don't think anyone who thinks this is up for debate, I think, is frankly not paying attention or is an unreliable actor. That this was a preemptive defensive attack. Israel has been told repeatedly by Iran, we want to annihilate you and the Jewish people. We know they are building a bomb. They have enriched uranium. Even the International Atomic Agency has made it very clear they have enriched uranium to a level which has only got a military purpose. Whether they are 2 years, 2 months or 2 days away from a bomb, at any point during that, it is perfectly sensible to me for the Israeli government to take those nuclear installations out, as they have done before. But crucially, there is this crucial bunker which we believe, way below ground, the Fordow nuclear site, buried deep beneath a mountain, that only the US has these incredible bunker-busting bombs that they can actually get close to destroying. 30,000-pound bunker-busting bomb, and they can penetrate rock. Is it like 60 yards before they even explode?
Yeah, about 61 metres, but that's under ideal conditions, and this is the difficulty. The tunnels and the bunkers that the Iranians have got are about another 100 metres deeper than that, they estimate, but it's whether these can cause enough of a shockwave to then damage them.
And to talk about if they'd sent enough, then they would bring down the mountain.
Bring them down to collapse.
But they would be doing a service to the something that Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, said. Well, okay, should the British be getting involved? Because
we are involved already.
Well, we have to give permission for these jets would likely have to take off from the Diego Garcia military base in Chagos Islands. Amazing how often that comes up. We'd have to give permission to the Attorney General, Lord Hermit, who is literally wrong about everything. That he's apparently given advice to the Prime Minister this could well be illegal. There is a lot of hand-wringing by David Lammy and talk about de-escalation and ceasefires. Well, no. De-escalation and ceasefire isn't going to save the Israelis from a nuclear attack, if there were one. But also, crucially, not speaking out as strongly as Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, by saying, yes, Israel is doing our dirty work and we should be grateful to them.
Yeah, exactly, and we're giving in to them. You're putting Iran into further context. Iran sponsored Hezbollah. Hezbollah, one of the biggest terror training organisations around the world. They trained the Taliban, the terror organisations that operated throughout Iraq. They're responsible for the most of British deaths on operations recently because they've trained the locals on how to use improvised explosive devices and all the rest of it. They have had a direct effect on this country. UK is involved at the moment because RAF Lakenheath, the Americans are based there. Their tankers are flying out of there. We have to give them permission to use that in operations. We've already done it. Diego Garcia is now more complex. I wonder if Lord Hermer is going to represent the Grand Ayatollah.
He probably would.
He's done Jerry Adams and he's done just about everyone else. But this is where it's farcical giving away Diego Garcia. The problem with the Americans is there's no guarantee that these massive ordnance penetrators, or GBU 57s they are in military speak,
will actually do the job.
Will actually do the job.
Okay, but it's good worth a try. What about people saying, look, we don't want to make ourselves a target?
Well, we're a target already. So
we're the little Satan.
Yeah, exactly. We're the target already. Iran is very, very anti-Britain. For years.
Do they burn our flag every Friday? I think they burn the American flag every Friday, don't they?
In certain places, they probably do. When I was in Iraq in 2005, 2006, the Iranians just across the border were exceptionally anti-British and had been for decades beforehand. We picked all of that up in all of the discussions that were coming through. So we are a target already.
Yeah, indeed. Again, it's interesting what's happening in Israel. We've seen a seventh day wave of strikes from either side. There's no doubt at all. You see the number of missiles coming from Iran, how much their ability has been depleted. But it is interesting, again, as always, watching the BBC, as I have to do for my job. I mean, I have to say I wouldn't do it otherwise. The reports about a hospital in Israel that has been bombed, hit by a missile strike, again, has been damaged, hit by a missile strike from Iranian missiles. Very, very different from the terminology they use when they're reporting from Gaza, where they're using information from the Hamas-run health ministry, where Israel has targeted a hospital. Completely different language that is used. I mean, genuinely, I thought it was bad enough that the BBC were kind of pro-Hamas and anti-Jew. Now they're pro-Iran as well. They're they're obsessed. They're obsessed with women as long as they're men who think they're women. Not that bothered about women, for instance, who are beaten and murdered when they don't cover their hair. Not cover their hair at all, but don't cover their hair quite properly enough. And a regime which wants to kill us. genuinely, I mean, if we're going to tackle the enemy, we need to tackle the enemy within. I would say the BBC is among those.
It is, but getting back into Iran itself, the other problem there is if it causes a collapse in the regime. I'm not seeing any indicators of there being a plan for what is going to come next. We never have
a plan. Yeah, be careful what you wish for. We know what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya
and this is part of the problem. This will all be on Donald Trump's go no go brief, and they'll be colouring it in traffic light colours, so red, amber, green. And
we will no doubt have a revival of extremism. That is the issue. And again, but there's already extremism, and there's extremists with a nuclear weapon. Yeah. Which one do you want? Yeah. Look, let's talk about what's happening here as well, because there's utter madness here. The benefits bill is huge. I mean, it is already huge. It's almost 60 million quid, or it's about 60 million quid. Benefits bill though is set to rise by 18 billion pounds a year. My maths was terrible there. It's up to 70 million a year if there is no reform. We've had Liz Kendall's planned reforms published, but I mean, they're only trying to cut 5 billion quid off that. Increase. So there won't be a cut to the benefit bill. It's going to go up, but it's going to go up by 13 billion instead of 18 billion a year, not over that total period, a year. That 18 billion quid extra year, if there were no reforms, is the equivalent, in fact, even more than the entire police budget for this country. These are insane numbers in a first world country with good healthcare. Even if they do manage to get through their tightening of eligibility criteria for particularly PIP, these are personal independence payments, we are still looking at another 750,000 more people claiming those benefits by the end of next year. I mean, they want to cut eligibility for 800,000 people. They'll lose around £4,500 a year. Now, Labour MPs are, of course, up in arms because everybody apparently is a victim. And there's no doubt at all, anyone who's paid attention to this, there are people who are claiming these benefits who don't need them. Correct. Particularly people who don't have a physical disability but have a mental health claim. People have been encouraged onto these sort of benefits, other kinds of sickness benefits as well. It is untenable, it is unreasonable to pretend, and frankly, obviously a lie, that we have a uniquely sick and disabled population here in the UK compared to other Western countries, which, according to our claimants for disability benefit and sickness benefit, we do. We need to do something about it, and I think it needs to be very, very harsh indeed.
I agree with you completely. A personal example, someone that I know quite well, who's not a friend, but the registered blind, and therefore they will get all the maximum benefits for, and she's got visual impairment, definitely. But when it goes to getting a case review, has to have a taxi and has to be escorted to get to the benefits office to have her assessment done and everything else.
I have a good friend who's blind who walks to the school every day.
Out for lunch in the pub. She can read the specials behind the bar better than I can. We'll take the bus around the place. We'll do courses that are paid for by her benefits at university. They're all paid for. But she's getting a house paid for. She's getting her kids paid for through university. She's getting everything else paid for.
And that's the thing. It's always not just those tiny little benefits that someone gets this much extra a week. Yeah. It opens up a whole raft of other benefits.
And I called her out on it, and she said, "No, I'm getting all this. I'm not going to go to work ever because I'll get all this paid, and I like my house and everything else.
I'm better off on benefits.
I'm better off." And I said, "Well, why are you doing all the courses and bits?" "Oh, I have to do something to keep me interested."
Oh my God!
And she's doing computer courses. Computer programming courses.
But this is,
it's all visual.
This is immoral.
Yes.
We need to call it out for what it is. Yeah. And the key thing is, we would be able to give more help to people who genuinely really needed it.
And that's the trouble.
If we weren't spending money on people who didn't. Yeah. I'm at a point where, honestly, I've said this before, I want village halls and people have to come forward and explain why they need their benefits. Yeah. And we get to vote. I'm at that level because I just do not trust that the system is getting it right.
And the other thing is that people that are on benefits should be forced to go out and work in their local communities to gain their benefits. So you go and you clean the graffiti up, you clean the litter up, you dig the weeds up.
You can't get another job,
because
then that's what you're going to do.
Local councils can't afford to to do that. You have to do 2 hours of community service a day to get your benefits.
Well, I mean, again, I've got a very good friend who works in the benefits office, and she says you can always tell when people want to work because they go out and get a job.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. They sign on because they've been made redundant, and then you don't see them again. But also, she's got a huge number of people who are disabled who desperately want to work. And again, the giveaway they do is that they do actually find work. And given that we're at, especially physical disability, there's mental disability is different. I think there are different issues there. But again, people who claim they've got anxiety and depression, who function otherwise. I think that's an insult to people who genuinely do have severe problems and concern. And you had, you're very open. You had post-traumatic stress disorder.
I had PTSD, very severe PTSD, and I get really annoyed at lots of people who claim that they've had a bit of PTSD. And it is a life-changing condition, and in many cases, unfortunately, it's a life-ending condition.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I just think we need to be, frankly, we need to teach an awful lot more resilience and require resilience. And I have a funny feeling that when you require it, you get it from most people. But as my friend says, she's got lots of people she knows who they are disabled and they still work, they get work. And there's so much more work available now because we can work remotely that actually disability wouldn't necessarily impede your ability to work. I'd love to hear from you on this. Love to hear from you. It's a neighbour. Do you know people like Philip, as all of us do, who apparently no one's playing with the system, but apparently we all seem to know someone, which is just a weird coincidence, isn't it, about these benefits reforms. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Also want to hear from you about Donald Trump approving a plan to attack Iran. Like, we know that's what's happened, but yet to give a final order. I want to know, crucially, should Britain join an attack on Iran? Should we get more involved than, as Philip says, we already are? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Leave a message on our YouTube page. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. This is Talk.
We eventually managed to secure justice against all the odds in December 2022 when she was convicted and sentenced at the Old Bailey for killing Harry. And she was sentenced to a custodial sentence, but it was suspended for 12 months, and she's now served that sentence, so she is presumably in the United States getting on with her life.
And she never came to the UK for that sentencing, is that right?
No, our plan was to bring her back physically, but then COVID hit.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. We've also got at the studio Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Just to let you know who's coming up on the show later. Rupert Lowe, independent, former Reform MP, is going to be talking to us about those benefits bill issues. Also going to be talking to Stephen Wolfe about the latest stories on migration. The Notting Hill Carnival and whether or not that should actually, well, be over and ended for good. And we're going to talk to the former UK ambassador to Iran more about the US-UK involvement possibly with the Iran-Israel war. And we're going to be talking to Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson, a crossbench peer and 11-time Paralympic gold medalist, of course, about that assisted dying bill that comes back to the Commons tomorrow. Big vote on that, and a lot of people who are supporting that bill in principle, very concerned about the bill in practice. So we'll get to that. Your calls welcome on all of those topics, of course. Let's get to some of your messages coming in right now about Donald Trump approving a plan to attack Iran. He's said that, but he says he hasn't made a decision yet whether he's going to attack and whether or not Britain should join any attack on Iran. Matt says, most definitely we stand with Israel, even if our anti-Semitic government does not. They seem to be in a similar place to the National Socialists in Germany circa 1937. Bob says, if Israel needs our help, we should be there to assist immediately. They are our allies and friends. Vic says, there's no need for Britain to join in. We don't have anything useful to bring to the action. The US has the B-52s and GBU-57s to destroy Iran's underground nuclear facilities. The Israelis can take care of the rest. And Aaron says, yes, we should. We have nuclear warheads that are mobile and could be launched in 45 minutes. Yeah, can we not launch nuclear weapons? That would be the thing we're trying to avoid. David says, yep, cut off the head of the snake. And James says, no, Israel is doing OK on their own. We should just support them from behind the scenes. Any direct action will escalate. It's kind of like, we'll hold your coat while you have the pub fight kind of territory there, isn't it, Philip? Well, let's go to the calls. What do you do?
No, I was going to say, the 45-minute is taking the P slightly about the 45-minute claim for Iraq.
There is it, yes. I was in the chamber watching that and we were thinking, really? But anyway, Archie is on the line. He's called up on 0344 499 1000 from Cambridgeshire and wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Archie.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. You sound a bit weary. Did you have a bad night's sleep in the heat?
Yeah, I'm a bit tired, but yeah, I'm all right.
What do you want to say about this then?
So about obviously, after a take on, should Britain get involved on the conflict? Should Britain take direct action whatsoever? I think Britain isn't in a good place as it is at the minute. We're not dealing with our own issues. We're not dealing with our own sort of quote-unquote invasion. But I believe it is in the world's interest for Iran not to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just depends on how we support them. I mean, we have the equipment. I believe if the US strikes, we shouldn't be dropping our own bombs, but we should be supporting them.
Right.
Either that's intelligence or simply back up in the air sort of thing. Because we can't let Iran have nuclear weapons.
We should be on side, but we probably don't need to get involved. But again, like giving permission to use our air bases that we have control of and the like. I mean, Philip says, we're kind of already doing that anyway.
Yeah. I mean, if it was to come to we needed to take direct action because, I don't know, something we'd have to get involved with the US, and I think we should because, in a way, Israel's the only free country in the Middle East, the only democracy, and Iran is the sponsor of terrorism all across the world.
Yeah, it seems very clear cut for you. I wish it was as clear cut for a lot of our politicians.
Philip said, it was saying they're the sponsor of Hezbollah, they train up the Houthis and stuff like that, Hamas. It's all involved. It all links back to Iran, however you want to look at it. So I believe, as one of the texts just said there from someone, cut off the head of the snake.
Yeah, absolutely. Archie, thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciate that. I was just about to go to another caller, and then the line went dead. But hopefully try and get them up again while we're talking. Someone is that? I don't know. Is it Kevin? Kevin is on the line. I'm not quite sure where. Kevin in Kent. And Kevin, you want to talk actually about the other topic we were just starting the show with, talking about disability benefits.
Yes. It always amazes me how these people can get these disability cars and they can get anyone they want.
The Motability scheme, yeah.
Motability, yeah. I've got a couple of people that I know that have got these cars, and one's got a BMW and what have you, and the other one's got a Nissan. And you sit there and you just think, how crazy is that? And I can't understand why the government just don't say to these people, right, this is the car you can have. It's a Ford Fiesta, it's whatever it is. But on the side of it, in big letters, disability car.
Oh, no, because that's implying like the sort of, I don't know, that's sort of like shaming, and there's no shame in having a disability. We want to make sure that people who are disabled, who need that extra help because they can't walk to the bus stop, or that they have the help they need, don't we?
Julia, there'd be a lot of people, right,
who wouldn't claim it.
In this country, that would not claim it because they'd be saying, "Oh no, I ain't doing that. This is the car that I want."
I'm not going to be able to pull down the pub when I'm driving that. Okay, I would just rather they didn't. Yeah, they weren't eligible for it. I don't know why we can't do more. We seem to sometimes stop people who really need benefits from getting them, and then we just hand them out willy-nilly to people. We know there's been all these exposés of these, people being checked on the phone, online, and so people can just say anything they want. If they say a keyword, they get access for sickness benefit, or they get access for that benefit. We need to have a better system, don't we?
It needs to be more rigorous, and as I say, if you did that with the cars, if you said you can have a car and it's got to be have some sort of signage on it, that would stop. I would say 75% of people
of the dodgy people claim. I mean, I know that there's with Motability you're allowed a certain quality, cost of a car, and then you can add your own money to upgrade it. But there is an element you think, but if you've got that money, why do you need all that help? But there we are. Kevin, interesting point. Thank you very much. Philip, what do you make of that?
Well, it always used to be. Do you remember the little blue three-wheelers that were the disability cars that were given by the government to those that were...
Like Only Fools and Horses, little yellow car.
Well, yeah, but these were, they were a light blue, and everyone knew that those were the disability cars that were given out. So it's something we've done before. Why do people have to have exactly what's the latest vehicle in the market? Why is that?
But also, they're all replaced every 3 years. We drive a car that's far older than that we bought second hand. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, some people who've got certain needs for their job have to guarantee that a car is, But there is billions that's going out on the Motability scheme, which it doesn't need to.
But a lot of that's down to the way things are financed and all the rest of it. The cars, companies that are doing that sort of thing need the cars to turn over quickly so that they've got a new fleet. They don't have to pay for them to be serviced. And things don't go wrong, and they can replace.
And they pay for all of that as well, don't they?
And then they sell the older car off to the likes of you and I. So we keep it for another 10 years, and they make profits.
And yet somehow it still works. What a surprise! 10:31 is the time. Love to hear your reaction to what Kevin had to say. Your thoughts on what Archie said as well, in terms of basically we need to cut off the head of the snake. You agree with the texter? Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk to independent former Reform MP Rupert Lowe about benefits. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:33 is the time. Let's go straight to our next guest. Haven't spoken to him for a while. Independent now MP, but was at Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. Rupert Lowe joins us. Very good morning to you, Rupert.
Morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Bit hot and sweltering as everyone is today in the heat, but great to have you on. Two big issues I want to talk to you about. I know that you've been talking about and messaging about and speaking in the Commons about over the last year or so, and that's benefits and also channel migrants. Let's talk first of all about the benefits bill. Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, published a plan for reforms yesterday. Labour MPs seem to think it goes way too far. I think most of us think it doesn't go far enough. Talking about the £52 billion a year current benefit and sickness benefit bill is going to be rising by £18 billion a year to 70 billion quid if there are no reforms, but it's still going to rise by £13 billion a year, even with her reforms, and we're going to have an extra 750,000 people claiming sickness benefits even after her reforms. Is she going far enough?
Well, of course not, Julia. But let me first say, and you did say this just now, that the important thing is that those people who do need help do get help.
Absolutely.
I think the genesis of this problem started, as usual, with Blair, Brown, Campbell and Mandelson. And what they wanted to do is create a dependency culture, which is effectively what Labour like, because they like statism, they like people who rely on the state. It usually means that Labour does well in an election.
Yeah. If everyone's on the payroll, they all vote to carry on getting paid. Yeah.
That's right. And as you know, the state accounts for, well, it depends on who you believe, but certainly over 46% of GDP directly and probably more indirectly. So, look, I mean, you mentioned Motability. My friends now buy second-hand Motability cars because they can't afford to buy new ones. So that sort of says to you where it's all gone wrong. And Motability, if you ever question Motability, which I've done, you get absolutely destroyed by people who are clearly benefiting unfairly from it. So I trust the government to distribute nothing sensibly. It's completely out of control. The DWP is just a farce. And I have a fantastic office manager in Great Yarmouth who's fantastic at doing all our casework. We're right on it, and we try and deliver for our constituents. He used to work at the DWP.
So he knows how it works.
He got so frustrated by the sort of indiscriminate handout of taxpayers' money that he had to come and do a more sensible job. And I'm absolutely delighted he did, because he's a fantastic chap.
And this is the issue, because we're constantly told by officials and by Labour, look, there's a tiny amount of fraud, it's a tiny percentage, it's not a big deal. But we're actually not talking about fraud in the strict legal sense, criminal sense a lot of times, although most of us would probably think it was criminal. We're talking about people who just, basically, They kind of exaggerate whatever their circumstances are. They say some of the key words they have to say when to claim benefits, whether it's their personal independence plan, whether it's other benefits. Loads of these assessments now carried out online. There's no way of verifying whether people are telling the truth. And the money is just handed out by people who seem in lots of benefits to be almost, to a certain extent, motivated financially in terms of how they're paid, by actually making more decisions in people's favour.
Again, Julia, you can't entirely blame it. We've got 9 million people of working age who aren't working in the country. And, a country that's successful is a country that's based on enterprise, it's based on risk-taking, it's based on the individual. It's not based on the state. So somehow what we've got to do is reverse this issue. It's a huge issue.
Yeah. And it's a societal issue, isn't it?
It's a societal issue. It's driven largely by people like Blair, Brown, Campbell and Mandelson, who wanted this. They wanted a dependency culture. So what we've got to see, hopefully, and I think it is changing, the British people, the only chance they've got of changing this is to vote into power through first past the post at the next election, a selection of people who are going to change radically this misalignment which is happening within our country. And on the one hand, you've got HMRC who are crushing the private sector, in line with, Angela Rayner's workers' rights legislation, which is costing the private sector $5 billion. Rachel Reeves's tax increases so far, which is costing goodness knows. But I mean, the national insurance increase and the national insurance threshold cut is causing private businesses a huge problem. As you're seeing, probably employment numbers are dropping, obviously, because the economy is not growing, because Labour don't understand the genesis of how an economy grows. It grows through individual risk-taking, and it grows through people basically investing long-term and creating wealth, not by governments sort of following some fad or fashion with taxpayers' money and wasting it, which is look at HS2 as an example.
And
of
again,
that.
we've got a government that seems to me to be totally out of touch, even though they're elected, they're a big majority of MPs, totally out of touch with how most people live their lives. Mind you, they keep telling us our energy bills are going down. We can see that's not happening. This, of course, always ties into the issue of legal migration, where we need to import people to do jobs, and yet we've got all these people. And I think 5 million of that 9 million people are working age people who really should be at work. There are people who are students, they're carers, they're doing other things, which are totally, looking after young children. No one would be complaining about that. But roughly 5 million of those people, frankly, should be at work. And if they were our kids, they would be at work. I think we can safely say, Rupert. Not all young, but still. But let's talk about migration, because constantly told we need more and more people coming to this country because we haven't got anyone to do the work job, even though we're paying them to sit on their backsides. But we've also got the problem of illegal migration. We've now up to a 50% increase on the number of people coming across the channel on those small boats, 50 a boat, hundreds again yesterday. And at the last weekend, this lovely calm weather, just bringing them over, 50% higher than it was this time of year last year under the Tories. And we know one of the issues again is people want to come because they know they can't be deported. Even in the case of a grooming gang, and you've spoken out an awful lot on this issue, and all credit to you for that. But Pakistan is refusing to take back the ringleaders of the Rochdale child grooming scandal after they renounced their Pakistani citizenship. And so Qari Abdul Rauf and Adil Khan, two of the worst grooming offenders that have ever been convicted. They lost their appeals against deportation in 2018, 7 years ago, but are still in this country because Pakistan won't take them back. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm quite clear on it, Julia. You know, I think we give all this foreign aid out. I think we give Pakistan £133 million a year.
Yep.
And we therefore have leverage. So if they refuse to take back these rapists, and you only got to look at the way in which our legal system is getting it all wrong when you look at the sentences that are handed out to these people, and you juxtapose that against the sentence that was handed out to Lucy Connolly.
Yep.
We're trying to hopefully have a debate on that issue in Parliament if enough people sign our petition, which we're hoping will go live soon. So I think we need to start getting tough, and we need a government that puts the interests of the British taxpayers at the top of the agenda. I think I'm right in saying that at the moment we're spending something like £1 billion a month on foreign national asylum seekers and something like £1 billion a year on illegal asylum seekers, or illegal economic migrants, as I call most of them. So, again, the thing is, it's out of control. It's our government is not an effective mechanism through which to manage our borders, as we've seen since Brexit. People voted for their borders back, and they haven't got them back. So, I mean, honestly, Julia, there's so much wrong. Where do we start? I think we have to have, and collectively, we need to start scrutinising the permanent secretaries, who I would argue, given that Parliament's been undermined by I think basically the two-party system. It's been the primacy of Parliament, the primacy of the elected MPs has been undermined. The ability of the people in Parliament has been undermined by selection processes from Cameron and Blair. So as a result, the civil service is out of control.
They're no longer civil servants. They think they can direct policy. They're open about it now.
Julia, they're definitely not. So I think, the media needs to start turning its attention. Who are these permanent secretaries? What do they believe in? What are their names? Are they fulfilling their function properly? Because they're actually the people running the country.
Yeah.
As I've said in the past, the front bench most of them have never done anything real in their lives. They've never run a business. There's an over-representation of human rights lawyers throughout our entire...
And again, they're led by the civil servants who've been there. And again, I agree with you. I think it's civil servants are part of the problem, but I also think that lawyers are part of the problem, or courts and judges.
Totally, Julia.
Let me get to another case just finally.
Lawyers are enriched by all this.
Latest story, an Afghani asylum seeker, Sadiq Niksat, who entered the UK legally on a small boat, imagine that. 2 years later, he raped a 15-year-old schoolgirl. Yesterday, he was handed a 12-year extended sentence at Livingston High Court after the rape in Falkirk Town Centre back in October 2023. Basically, he approached a girl who's 15, asked for her phone number, asked if she had a boyfriend, made sexual remarks, and then basically dragged her behind a pub and raped her. She said she kept telling him she was 15. What was absolutely extraordinary to me was his defence counsel, Janice Green, told an earlier hearing that her client had not been educated about the significant cultural differences between the UK and Afghanistan, and there was a cultural barrier and indeed a language barrier between Niksat's home country, where child marriage was common. And she said, I'm not suggesting that means that he reasonably believed, or he was the complainer, the woman, the girl was consenting, but that there's a reason why he could have misunderstood. Well, given that you're not supposed to have sex before marriage in Islam, I'm not quite sure why raping a 15-year-old behind a pub would count as being part of his culture, as an extraordinary defence for her to offer, and she should be ashamed of herself. But the idea that, well, he thought it was OK to do this, presumably because this was a girl who was not covered up, not shrouded, no face covered, no. So he thought she was frankly game. And this is part of the problem, isn't it? We now know, a huge number of sexual assaults. We know a huge number of the grooming gangs from particular areas in Pakistan, their heritage, but sex assaults carried out by foreigners coming to this country who have a completely different culture to the one that we have here.
Well, I think there is a cultural issue, Julia, and possibly, our what I call underage white working class girls, is the family unit as strong as the family unit within the Islamic community? So what are the reasons? I think we need to start to analyse why this has been happening. And my rape gang inquiry, which we're carrying on with to hold the government to account, because I don't know about you, but I don't trust governments. Not only do they run up a huge bill with all these inquiries, they usually take forever. Yeah. And they usually end up with the establishment judging the establishment, which means you don't get the truth. So I think in his case, you asked me the question, it's a bit like if you aid and abet somebody who's doing something illegal, you yourself are judged as breaking the law. Yeah. Whether or not you know you're aiding and abetting something illegal. Now, it doesn't, for me, serve as a defence, the fact that he doesn't know that he's doing something wrong. Yeah. He's breaking our laws. He is effectively treating somebody underage in a way he shouldn't. And for me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think...
I'd just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
But we can't. Legally we can't. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept them, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now. The British people, Julia, are incredibly long-suffering. Yeah. But do you know what? I think they've got pretty much to breaking point.
I agree with you. I feel that there has been an absolute change in the last few months where people have gone, we're done now, this is it, enough is enough. Rupert Lowe, really good to get you back on the show, independent, former Reform MP for Great Yarmouth. Thank you for joining us. Philip Ingram, your response on that particular issue?
Well, yeah, I think that lawyer, if the cultural norms of the country that he came from were then applied and the family went and beat him to death for raping their daughter, the lawyer might have a slightly different view and using that as a defence. Yeah. So you can't have it one way and not the other way. Yeah. And this is where...
Also, could I use that defence in Afghanistan? No, in my culture, I don't have to cover up. Exactly. So I can do what I want. I shall wear a bikini walking down the street, shall I?
The most interesting thing Rupert said, and I agree with him completely, is I think the British people have got to that point where we've had enough. Yep. And I'm quite a mild-mannered and I will accept most things, and I feel myself now going, when's the next protest coming? Because I'm going to get involved in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Peaceful?
Oh, peaceful, completely peaceful.
But these things have a habit, especially in hot, sweltering weather, of not remaining peaceful.
No. But
I think, protest is, again, how many times are we going to vote and tell our governments of different hues, this is what we want done? How many times is it not going to be done? And we're just going to say, enough is enough.
Last week, 2,222 illegal migrants came across the channel.
Nice round number.
Yeah, that is 111 million quid a year we're paying from the Caribbean. That's in 1 week.
But it's 2,222 young men mostly. Because, by the way, Darren Jones, Treasury Minister, they are mostly men coming to this country, and many of whom are just like this man, who simply, this Afghanistani, who simply do not have the same morals and values and culture that we share, and putting particularly our young women and our young girls at risk. Yeah. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Do keep them coming in. Up next, we're going to be talking to the Free Speech Union's Connie Shaw about, students going to uni this September. Well, expect to be offended and shocked, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's called free speech, love, and if you don't like it, maybe university isn't for you. That's up next. This is Talk.
So yes, he did some of it, but he also didn't prosecute an awful lot of people because he called the witnesses unreliable. And so they didn't go through with the prosecution. So an awful lot of people, an awful lot of victims were left without any justice under Keir Starmer's reign.
And that, to me, on a human level, is one of the biggest and most heinous things about this, because this was working-class girls, maybe from fractured families, maybe with some issues, socially,
some of them
mentally.
in care.
Some of them from care, with no support network at all, who have been used and abused, and society has turned a blind eye.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, I say the home of common sense, also the home of free speech. But apparently our universities haven't been the home of free speech for quite some time, whether it's a lecturer hounded out for voting for Brexit, or not really thinking that men can become women on a random Thursday afternoon just because they think it, or any other view. I don't know, supporting Israel. Bit of an issue these days, isn't it? Whether it's students who simply want to, well, safely just, give their opinions without being hounded out of class and forced sometimes even to apologise to fellow students for simply giving their point of view. Freedom of speech on campus has been destroyed in recent years. Well, this September might be a shock to some students, but be welcomed by many others. It's coming back thanks to the Office for Students, which regulates universities, and a new freedom of speech law. Delighted to say that a spokesman at the Free Speech Union, Connie Shaw, has joined us in the studio. Good morning to you to discuss this. Now, the headline's great today. Be ready to be shocked and offended at university, students. Tell us what the change is going to be and who's outlined it.
So this is guidance that's come out from the Office for Students because of the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, which will come into power this August.
Which the government really wanted to drop, didn't they?
Yes. They really have to be pushed to unshelve this and then passed basically a watered-down version of the original version which the Tory government proposed. But this guidance is a massive win for free speech, especially because the OFS has taken the advice of the Free Speech Union, which recommended that their definition of protecting free speech means protecting all lawful speech. So that means that universities should not be regulating any legal speech.
Things like trans women are not women.
Yes.
And that's genuinely been something. We've had regular guests on the show who've been hounded out as students, and we know, famous cases, lecturers simply for holding that view and expressing it in a completely reasonable context.
Absolutely. And so hopefully this will give a lot more reassurance to academics, because we've also seen those stats that a huge proportion of academics feel like they can't speak about controversial issues.
To their students or in their own papers.
Yes, and I know academics personally who have had campaigns against them. Obviously we have the massive cases of Kathleen Stock and the like, but I know this happens to academics all the time, where they have students making complaints about them, tracking their social media to check what they're saying online, and now they can be reassured that universities will be held to account to protect their speech.
Universities may not agree with them because they may be as woke as the students, but they have no legal choice. And again, it's very important that there is actually a punishment for the universities. And the Tories were going to go much further, weren't they? But it's often not just the cases. I know that some of the Free Speech Union deals with a lot. There's some high-profile cases where people do something, say something, and then they get punished for it. But there are actually far more cases of people who don't say what they want to say, whether it's lecturers or students or people in the workplace, because of the fear of that. And it's that shutting down of freedom of speech. And the thing I find so extraordinary about this, and my daughter, she's got her last 2 A-levels today. She's going to go off to university. When I went to university many, many years ago, the idea that you would shut down someone saying something you disagreed with, or ban them, or think that a university lecturer should lose their job, or that students should be, attacked, sometimes even physically, or banned from the campus for giving their opinion, whether you agreed with it or not. People would have laughed at you and said that was weird. How did this happen?
Well, I think it's almost a perfect storm of many things. The fact that identity politics has taken such a hold of society. And then obviously we had COVID, where everyone was, well, young people, especially my generation, were on their phones, felt very powerless. So the least they could do was become mini activists online. And they've come into university thinking that the most appropriate way to deal with people that they disagree with is to silence their views. And the attitudes of students is really quite shocking. They think that they have the right to not encounter anything that they find offensive or unsettling, which is great, which is why it is great that Arif Ahmed has proposed that
Arif Ahmed, he's the head of the Office for Students,
who has proposed that they have these sort of inductions to practice being shocked by opinions.
Terrifying?
It is terrifying.
But we've had this issue in schools. I mean, this is a problem with teacher training colleges. It's a problem with universities, academics. I mean, I'm not supposed they're not going to come across many academics who are all working from home still on Zoom, for goodness sake. But we've had this with young people, again, this expectation and some of the statements, these demonstrations, whether it's anti-Israel, supposedly pro-Palestine, but it's actually anti-Israel, the climate change issue, this idea that I'm 18 years old and you all have to listen to me, which is weird because in my day, I mean, people didn't actually shut you up, but they did tell you to shut up.
Well, yes, but students now are taking that into their own hands to actively campaign. I've had people try and campaign against my presence on campus when I was at university. The student union even compelled
and
students to
what was your offence, supposedly?
Oh, I'd basically expressed some gender-critical views on campus.
You expressed biological fact on, well, I mean, frankly, I want you hounded out of this studio for that. But this is the thing, we're not talking about, now there was the claim, a complete lie from the Education Secretary that, well, we need to protect the freedoms of Jewish students, so we don't want to bring in this. No, Jewish students have had their freedoms, safety on campus, I mean, in America as well, but here as well. I've friends whose kids are Jewish who've been told by people, don't go to like London School of Economics. I'm Jewish and I don't feel safe here. You can't go there. We've already got that. Freedom of speech is what protects everybody.
Exactly, and again, that is what students don't understand, that one day they might have an opinion which other people think is worth silencing, and so they don't see why freedom of speech is important. They see it as this promoting hate speech, so people can just... I've been described as pretending to be a feminist, but actually that's just a guise for being able to spread hate speech.
Obviously. But again, it's not just in universities, or that's breeding it, because a lot of us thought, well, they're getting this at university, but when they get into the real world of work, well, no, now they've got the HR, DI departments who are going along with all this madness. Now they've got, the government, the media, and again, this whole sort of, you're a quote climate denier, you can't go on the BBC anymore. This is happening on a grand scale, but we need to stop it in universities, which is where we're supposed to have freedom of thought for new ideas. The whole point of going to university is to be exposed to different people and different ideas.
Well, quite, and these are the young people who are going to be going into politics and going into the civil
How terrifying
service.
is that? Needing lessons on freedom of speech.
And obviously it is essential to political discourse that we do take the risk of offending each other when we debate. As Jordan Peterson said, everyone takes the risk of offending each other when you debate, but if you don't take that risk, how are we ever meant to pursue the truth?
Connie, sure. I mean, thank you so much for coming in. The great work you do at Free Speech Union. I mean, from your own experience, of course. Philip Ingram is still here with us. I mean, it is just extraordinary that so many people, older and younger, but particularly bad among the younger people now, just think that this is like the norm. Of course, if I don't agree with it, it must be hate speech, even when it's a statement of fact.
Yeah, but they'll get into the illegal areas where they will support an illegal organisation or like illegal causes like Hamas and all the rest of it, and think that that's all right because it's their opinion, and therefore it's their right under freedom of speech to be able to do that. But they'll try and close other people down. From my career perspective in intelligence, if you're not exposed to all sides and all thinking, you can't put yourself in the position of someone else's view and look at the world through their eyes
but
and
also,
try and understand things.
But also know whether your view is correct or not.
Yes.
I always make sure I read and listen to as many different media outlets and different people. I know I always disagree with this person on this particular idea. What is their argument? Okay, why do I think that's wrong? Or maybe they're right, maybe I'm wrong. And you defeat bad ideas, you defeat hate with good ideas, don't you, Connie?
Well, quite, and actually I find it... I think that students need to learn that actually there's far more power comes from being able to back your own point up. There is no power in your own defence being to silence the opposition. If your argument relies on the opposition being silenced, then what does that say about your own argument?
You don't have a good argument. Exactly. Students, man up. Not allowed to say that anymore. It's probably hate speech, isn't it? Don't we? Trans woman up. Does that make you feel better? Connie Shaw, big thanks for joining us. More from Philip Ingram. Lots more top guests coming. Love to hear your thoughts on all of it talking about. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense and sweltering heat, as we are all surviving in this heat wave. It's going on for a lot more longer. Well, this is going to be a heat wave that lasts a weekend. We've got a couple of weekends, I think 3 in a row. Normally it's just really, really, really hot on Wednesday, Thursday, and then you get rain for the weekend. So well done, everybody. Thank God for global warming. Let's have another little round of applause for global warming and climate change. Love it. Anyway, welcome to the show, the home of common sense and climate denial. Listen, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have your company. And if you're working from home in the garden, wink, 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 great to have you on board as well. I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock, and coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking more about Donald Trump approving a plan to attack Iran, but yet to give a final order. He says he won't know till a second before he gives that order. But sources say he is waiting to see if Iran will concede to a last-minute deal to end its nuclear programme before moving forward with attack plans. Personally, I'm of the view that whatever they say, they're not going to stick to. Let's get the nuclear capability dealt with once and for all. But the question is, I'm asking you, is should if America does go in to attack Iran with those bunker buster bombs alongside Israel, should Britain join that attack on Iran? Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. I also want to hear your thoughts on spending on sickness benefits. It's set to jump by a whopping £18 billion a year to £70 billion by the next election. I mean, just extraordinary sums. That's if nothing is done to trim the bill and reform. But we've had new reforms announced by the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall yesterday. Big number of MPs, probably up to 100 Labour MPs, aren't happy because everyone claiming benefits absolutely needs them, obviously. But even if they do go ahead with those reforms, we're talking about just cutting £5 billion a year off that extra £18 billion a year. So we're not cutting the benefit bill. We're simply going to have a lower increase in the benefit bill. This is all unsustainable. Unsustainable. So what should we do about it? Give us a call on that. 0344 499 1000. Also going to be talking more about the Channel migrants. I mean, this is just madness. French police failed to prevent a man on a crutch. He had a crutch, for God's sake, from getting into a migrant boat setting out across the Channel. This comes after Keir Starmer admitted that the small boats crisis was getting worse. No, really, Keir? And ahead of an expected surge in crossings due to warmer weather still approaching. Also, 2 breakthrough Alzheimer's drugs have been deemed far too expensive for far too little benefit to be offered on the NHS. Even though they are the first medicines to slow the disease, could give people extra time living independently. Plus, the Notting Hill Carnival is back up for debate. It could be axed unless the government steps in, organisers have warned, with extra funding. Festival chiefs said that additional funding is essential for safeguarding public safety. Given 2 people were stabbed to death last year, you think they probably do need a bit more funding for public safety. But should it be coming from you and me, the taxpayer? Because the government doesn't have any money that isn't ours. Don't forget, if you've missed any of the show, do have a look at our YouTube page. It's cunningly called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I know. Clever idea. We pay consultants millions to come up with that. But if you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. So much coming up. So much more coming up from Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, joins us always on a Thursday. And it's always good to have you in the studio, Philip. Anyway, but particularly when we've got such a big issue like, should the UK join the US if they go ahead with airstrikes on Iran in that war? This is your area of expertise. I asked you earlier, do you think we will? Do you think we should?
I think we should, and I think we will. We're already involved. We're providing the United States support because of the bases that they're launching a lot of the attacks, or could launch a lot of the attacks from. We're providing wider.
And we have to give permission for the US to launch those.
Yes, jets? when they're using RAF bases in the UK, they're using RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. We're providing other support that I probably can't talk about on air, the Americans can't do that. We have provided the Americans tanker support beforehand whenever they've carried out air attacks.
Yeah. But there's an issue over Diego Garcia base in the Chagos Islands. Okay, amazing how much the Chagos Islands come up. Totally irrelevant, handing them to Mauritius. We just happen to have a massive base there, so does the US. But we, according to Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, who is the worst person in the world, and wrong about everything, we understand, sources has given advice to the Prime Minister saying that it would be, if the Israeli war on strikes on Iran are deemed to be illegal under international law, we would not be allowed to give permission for a US craft to take off from Diego Garcia. This is insane.
Well, thank goodness the Attorney General can only give advice, because international law is not black and white, and therefore his advice can be ignored. How
is it illegal for Israel to have a preemptive defensive strike on a country that has said, we know they're developing nuclear weapons, even the IEA, the Atomic Agency, knows they are. You could developing uranium and enriching it to the point where it's beyond nuclear power station capability and its military capability, and you've stated repeatedly, we want to annihilate Israel. And they have used their proxies and have previously bombed Israel. I'm not quite sure how people don't think it's a defensive act.
But this is the same Attorney General who won't refer individuals back to the courts again to get their sentences taken to a proper level for raping children, who represented Jerry Adams, who's represented terrorists and horrible regimes around the world against the British state. Why he's in this position, I do not know. So his advice isn't worth the paper it's written on. If
he's just an old human rights lawyer chum of the Prime Minister.
Well, exactly. And
we're going to be hearing a lot more about Lord Hammer.
And is dangerous, is very dangerous. We're providing a lot of support for the Americans. We will not be providing aircraft going in and dropping bombs in Iran. We don't have the same capability. Diego Garcia is where the American B-2 bombers, their stealth bombers, are based. Those are the ones that carry these massive ordnance penetrators, or GBU-57 bombs, the ones that are 30,000 pounds or 13.6 tons.
Yes. And then the key thing about this is only America has these weapons that are capable of basically penetrating rock underneath a mountain. We believe this particular, the Fordow, is it Fordow nuclear site?
Fordow nuclear site. The bombs
buried beneath a mountain in the rock.
The bombs can, in best conditions, penetrate a couple of hundred feet before they then explode. And 13.6 tons of explosives going off will register on the Richter scale as an earthquake, and lots of those going in would do a lot. However, the Fordow nuclear site is anticipated it's another 100 plus feet deeper than that, and it's whether those shock waves would cause enough damage in them to cause the tunnels.
But worth a try.
Definitely worth a try.
What about the idea that, look, if we got involved, we become more of a target?
We're already a target. Iran hates us probably more than it hates the United States. It blames the UK for many of its ills, and part of that goes right back...
Our past in the Middle East, or...?
Yeah, part of that's under our past in the Middle East, because Iran was never a homogenous country until officials in Whitehall in London took a map and drew a straight line with a ruler and went, we've taken Persia, we've split it up into this,
and
you've got that. We'll call that bit Iran.
They hate us. We're the little Satan. They hate us already. So
we're
also, I mean,
a big little
our
Satan.
security services foiled an Iranian plot on British territory only recently. It hasn't even gone to court yet. I mean, we know what they're doing. They've been funding virtually every terror plot going. Yeah.
And
we are already being damaged by Iran.
They have caused the casualties of most British troops deployed in operations in Iraq and Afghanistan in recent years, because Iranian-sponsored Hezbollah. Hezbollah have provided the training and improvised explosive devices for all of the different groups that operated throughout Iraq. And I remember them training the Taliban in Afghanistan and crossing the border and in there. Nobody thought that Iran would get involved in that, and we had very, very clear intelligence.
And they've been supplying some weaponry to Russia as well.
Yes.
I mean, they need to be gone.
They do need to be
gone. End of. OK.
Definitely.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. It's the latest coming out of Iran. The Iranian foreign minister has confirmed that he is due to meet with his British and European counterparts tomorrow. Bear in mind, of course, the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is today in America meeting with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State. That was a last-minute trip. Also from Israel, the Israeli Defense Minister says Iran's supreme leader, quote, cannot continue to exist. This is after the latest Iranian missile attack. Of course, we saw an attack on a hospital in Israel. It is quite extraordinary. The Iron Dome, the protection for Israel is extraordinary. If they did not have this protection, we would be seeing mass casualties in Israel. One of the things I want to put to you, and I put this to the Israeli ambassador, Zibi Hotfeli, who's in the studio yesterday. Some people are saying, look at these precision attacks that Israel is carrying out. Iran is blatantly, openly attacking civilians, no question at all. They're not attacking any military sites. Israel is quite clearly the precision bombing of these targeting of not just military sites, nuclear sites, but the scientists, the military leaders. Donald Trump saying that we know where the Ayatollah is and we can take Khomeini out as and when we choose, but not yet, but apparently he told the Israelis not to do it when they'd wanted to do it. I think, again, be totally justified thing to do. The niceties of international law notwithstanding, I just don't care. This is about national survival. But I put to the ambassador from Israel, why is it we've seen so many civilian casualties in Gaza from Israeli bombing compared with Iran, where we have not seen, despite a whole week of massive bombardment, we have not seen mass civilian casualties. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's a very good question, very pertinent question, and it's really quite simple. Iran does not tend to put its military infrastructure in the middle of built-up civilian areas, and where Israel has had to target those built-up civilian areas to get individual military leaders in their apartments, they have had very, very accurate intelligence that they are in those apartments, and those military leaders don't surround themselves with lots of other civilians to keep them safe in it. Whereas in Gaza, Hamas deliberately put their military infrastructure under civilian infrastructure. Yeah. They deliberately brought lots of civilians in and around where they would put their military placements. And even if you drop the most accurate of weapons, and Israel only has a few of them, even if you drop the most accurate weapons, the collateral damage that comes from whenever something goes bang is going to kill civilians that are in the area if they're there.
So two just very, very different policies. This is down, again, something we've been making a point for a long time. This is Hamas policy.
It's Hamas policy. Hamas
they want as many
civilian casualties as possible. They want as many pictures of children on our televisions that are suffering as possible, because they know that's...
It is incredible to me, though, reports after reports about all these attacks by Israeli forces on civilians who are queuing up to get humanitarian aid. And it's amazing, given that everyone apparently in Gaza has a mobile phone, how little footage there ever is of these actual Israeli soldiers firing on these people. And I still can't work out, why would the Israelis provide a load of aid, and then after these awful reports about Israeli attacks on civilians, mostly, I don't know for sure, most likely false, because they're coming out of Hamas-led media and foreign and health ministry, and aid workers who just frankly couldn't possibly know what had actually happened to those people who are coming in. That all these people apparently never had mobile phones on when the IDF are actually firing. But what on earth would be the motivation for the IDF to do that?
Well, the only motivation would be if they thought that their positions were going to be stormed and overrun, especially if people had weapons, and therefore were Hamas. And Hamas are caught because they are not controlling the food supply into the people.
How they make money.
Well, it's not only how they make money. I've seen videos of them dealing with people who haven't followed the Hamas route, and what they do is they beat them with sticks, then shoot them with semi-automatic weapons in the legs before they then shoot them in the head. And they do that publicly in front of everyone, with women and children surrounded them, and nobody's doing that. And we never see pictures of Hamas fighters being taken into the hospitals to be treated.
Funny that.
They're never there.
No, even though they make up roughly half of those who've been killed, even under Hamas's own figures.
Exactly.
There we are. It's utterly bizarre. It's almost like what we're being told about what's happening isn't entirely true. I know.
Ever.
Who's going to tell the BBC that, though? Let's all look. We talked about these benefits bill rising, and I will come back to that. And we talked about migrants, and we're going to be coming on to that with Stephen Wolfe in a few moments. Let's get to some other topics, because 2 drugs to treat Alzheimer's have been rejected for use by the NHS because their benefits are too small to justify their high cost. This is a decision by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. They are basically standing by their earlier decision. It was reviewed to turn down, I don't know who makes up the names of these drugs. I'm going to get it wrong, but I'll try anyway. Donanemab, or I don't know, and lecanemab. Probably completely different pronunciations, but they considered new information submitted by the manufacturers. The various Alzheimer's charities said the decision was disappointing and a painful setback. But these 2 drugs are made by 2 different companies. They say they're going to appeal. But they work in a similar way. They slow down the early stages of Alzheimer's. It's a huge step forward. But they cost a lot of money. You need to have brain scans regularly. They need to be administered regularly. It's not just give someone a pill and it's all over and done with. There is a huge cost to the NHS. Do you think it was the right decision?
Well, you have to let NICE do it. But the cynic in me turns around and says, who's going to benefit out of that apart from the patient? It would be the local authorities, which is because it would reduce the need for social care. Is the NHS going to benefit out of it? No, it's a massive cost to the NHS, and therefore if you compare it to the fat jabs, who benefits from the fat jabs? It's the NHS, because what they're doing is...
No, it doesn't. There's no evidence that it will. No, this is the thing. I don't understand why we're not giving a drug to people who are suffering from early stages dementia and Alzheimer's, but we're going to give, which so far untreatable, but we are going to give people free fat jabs on the NHS. Given that you lower your appetite anyway on these drugs, you will be spending less money on food, certainly on the takeaway. You're only getting these on the NHS if you're massively overweight. You're not massively overweight because you're eating too much broccoli. You're massively overweight because you're living on takeaways. Sorry, end of. And you're buying a lot of unhealthy food. So the money you're saving on that alone, you could afford. Same reason I don't think we should give nicotine patches out on NHS. If you can afford to buy cigarettes, you can afford your nicotine patches. I think it's just obscene. I don't know whether these, I'm not a medic, I don't know whether these drugs are any good, but I don't understand some of the things that we are willing to spend money on, which can easily be solved by people doing things themselves.
This is, yes, I agree, individuals should pay towards their jobs and all the rest of it if it's a lifestyle issue, in the same way with nicotine patches. But it's the NHS that's going to win out over a longer term, because it'll stop people getting diabetes as early. That's a big cost for the NHS.
The actuarial firms, the pension firms, they have not changed how they're going to be making payouts based on whether or not people are on these jabs. If these jabs were having the massive impact they were going to have, and people were going to lose all this weight, they weren't going to get so much cancers, diabetes, heart attacks, have amputations, all of that stuff. If that were the case, and these people were going to keep the weight off, if that's the only basis on which these we would have that benefit for individuals and the NHS, if that were the case, people would be living longer, and then they would have to, the pension companies would have to pay out lower annual dividends. They're not doing that, and they're not doing it because they've looked into the studies and they know that these jabs won't work long term.
And that's because the studies are too short term at the moment for them to make those levels of financial decisions.
No, you come off the drugs, you put the weight back on. And huge number of people don't lose a significant
but
amount of
these
weight
drugs have only been around for a couple of years, and that doesn't give them enough.
We also don't know the safety data.
Correct.
I swear to you, in 5 years' time, there is going to be a massive scandal about beer. There are no drugs without massive side effects.
Exactly.
There have been some reports about an awful lot of deaths related to people taking these jabs.
No, every drug's got side effects. You take antidepressants, and you and I had to take antidepressants, and you open the indicators and warnings thing and read it, and the top thing says this drug could make you depressed. It could make you suicidal.
I'm not sure this is a good drug.
Why am I on this?
I know, exactly. Well, we should talk about just one final word, quick on this one. Notting Hill Carnival, if they don't get any more cash to deal with basically policing and public safety. We're talking about, was it 1 million, 2 million people sometimes at this carnival in Nottingham? I used to live just round there. Most people who live there just frankly board up their homes and get the hell out for that long weekend. But do you think that they should be either moved? Do you think they should be getting more public cash?
No, they need to make the cash themselves. The policing bill in 2023 alone was £11.7 million. Last year there was 8 people stabbed at it.
2 to death.
Anything where it's normal for people. Hey, no, a few people got stabbed. Hey, people are on drugs. A few people have been sexually assaulted. No, that's wrong. It's like football hooligans, football matches. I'd ban all football because of the hooliganism that goes on.
I think we've strayed into different territory now, but there we are. I'm going to leave the totalitarian supreme leader, Philip Ingram, for a moment to go for a quick break. After that, we're going to get to your calls on all the different topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say, and we'll read your texts and tweets as well, coming in thick and fast. This is Talk Home with Common Sense.
Any one of these stories should be front page news, should be a source of great shame for the cronies that occupy the Palace of Westminster. And yet now we see these so many times. In fact, frankly, half the time, people assume they're parodying. I sometimes talk to friends. Have you heard about this one? I genuinely thought that was a joke.
Yeah.
I genuinely thought about the Kenyan convicted rapist, multiple convicted rapist, who was not deported because a judge said he might have a tough time back in Kenya due to his alcoholism. People thought that was a joke.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:24 is the time. Just to let you know, some details coming out about some stats from the Ministry of Justice that came out this morning. And new research published today shows that violence is rife in overcrowded, unsafe prisoners. Offenders are nearly 20% more likely to be involved in assaults if they were in an overcrowded prison. Basically, our men's prisons are certainly at 99% plus capacity. We knew we had always men who had to be released, apparently, from prison. But the rate of prisoner-on-prisoner attacks in men's prisons rose by 11% in 2024, and the rate of assaults on prison staff rose by 13% in the same period, and it reinforced the need that we need 14,000 more prison places. I'd say we need about 100,000 more prison places and put them all away, but that's just me. 11:25 is the time. Let's go straight to the phone lines now. Lots of calls coming in on lots of different topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And Tim is on the line in South Wales. Tim, you want to talk about benefits, and this is as a benefits bill is set to rise by 18 billion quid a year without any reforms, but it's going to rise by 13 billion quid a year even with the reforms the government is planning.
Hey, Julia.
Morning.
Great talking to you. Julia, you talked earlier about the armed forces with procurement, and I honestly think that the benefit system is exactly the same. Now, if you took a scenario where somebody that's on benefits gets paid cash, they can spend that money on absolutely anything: alcohol, cigarettes, fast food, whatever they want to do. Whereas if the benefit was paid through a card system, it could be targeted. And what I mean by that is that benefit would buy Whole Foods, wouldn't buy fizzy drinks. It would buy all the good stuff for the kids. You could put an allowance on it for a toy from the shops.
But basically, we're going to limit. If you're living on the state, then you're going to be limited in what you can buy.
Julia, let me finish, because there's another side to this. So, in effect, you could make the benefit pay for essentials. It could buy transport to job interviews. It could pay for your electricity bill, but couldn't be used to buy crack cocaine or whatever else you want to talk about. But then it goes deeper than that, because what the government could actually do is then buy those items from specific suppliers. So you go to the energy suppliers and you say, look, guys, we've got 10 million people on benefits here. Who wants to supply them with electricity? We're not interested in all that 25 pence a unit business. We want a serious deal on this. So you could actually negotiate the prices for the things that the benefit is buying, so you'll get the benefit of bulk purchase. You could do it in the supermarket. Yeah. We don't want to pay £1.40 for a loaf of bread. We want them for 60p each. The card wouldn't look any different to any other card that existed. There'd be no stigma attached to it.
You get these low prices. Okay. I mean, I understand where you are on that, and my instinct is, certainly for people. I mean, certainly for like young people claiming benefits. So it's no fun. However, we know when these sort of ideas have been tried, there's then basically a barter system that goes in. The organised gangs basically will buy your card off you and the value of that off you, but we'll pay you a fraction of it, and then it just becomes organised crime gets involved, unfortunately.
They're selling it for a fraction of its value.
But people do that. That's what people do. People who are, if someone robs your mobile phone, they don't sell it for, the value of you selling that mobile phone. They sell it for like 10 or 20% of its value to get the cash.
Julia, if somebody's stupid enough to sell that card at a fraction of its value when they need to live off it, then frankly, that's their problem.
There is that. Love to hear everyone else's thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Philip, just a brief word from you on that.
Yeah, lots of good common sense ideas, but when common sense meets reality, there's always those that find ways around it. Because if someone sells their card, they then just say they've lost a card. There'll be some way of getting a new card then, and the
get the money transferred. I think there's a micromanaging of people's lives. I think the solution is just not to allow these people to be eligible. That's in the first place.
Exactly.
Let's get some of your texts and tweets coming in about Iran and whether or not Britain should join any attack by the US if it does go ahead on Iran. Sally says it should be a collective effort and not only Israel and America's job to keep Iran a nuclear-free zone. Europe needs to assist and have a voice on this issue. I have to say, I think Germany's Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor, has been very strong on this. Callie says both America and Israel are our allies, so yes, we should be if called upon. Jack says no, why should Britain get involved? It'll just drag the rest of us into the mess. Let Israel and Iran fight it out. It's their religious war. Hate to tell you, it's not. Harriet says nobody should be attacking Iran. The USA and UK have no business there. How about we both exit the Middle East region and focus on our own domestic problems for once? I know, why don't we focus on our problem with migrants and our problem with terrorism, which of course have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with events in the Middle East. Come on, Harriet. Get up with the programme. Isaac says, no, we've got more than enough domestic issues to sort out without getting involved in another Middle East conflict. We should stay out of it. And Lily says, yes, all countries should unite and support each other against terrorist regimes. We want to remain safe and free for our and our children's sake. Lots of very different opinions there. I know what you're waiting for today, though. You want to find out what Georgina in London thinks of this, and so do I. She's on the line. Very good morning on a sweltering hot day, Georgina. How are you?
I'm absolutely fabulous, darling, but not looking as good as you, I might add.
I swear to you, I've said this to my husband, I get more compliments from Georgina in any given week than I do from him in a year.
Well, he's a fool. He should be complimenting you all the time, my darling. Anyway, let's get to the important things. England getting involved in this war. Well, at one time our forces were the very best in the world and have been emulated all over the globe, but now they've been depleted to such a degree that we cannot get involved in this war, Julia. You're talking about a government who only a few weeks ago were saying they were going to get a Dad's Army-style force to man our borders. So please, if they want to get involved in wars with the big boys, then they need to be spending at least 5% to 7% GDP.
Yeah, well, there's also, there's a report today suggesting that actually they're trying to delay by a couple of years, even going up to the sort of the 3.5%.
Yes, I know, darling, I'm all over it. I've been saying this for 20 years, Julia, since the Argentinian War. Everything went downhill from then. Now, Israel has already done the hard work of bringing Iran to their knees. Donald Trump's now going to fly in like Superman to finish the job off and get the spoils. God love him. But I think with Iran, forewarned is forearmed. Don't warn them. Attack is the best form of defence, and that's what they should have done. You can't negotiate with radical fundamentalists and madmen.
This is the thing. I do find it so frustrating, Labour obsessed, but we should be talking. Yeah, good luck with that. I really hope I'm never in a pub fight with these people, and they're supposed to be on my side. Georgina, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Georgina, in London, of course. And this is the thing, Philip, you can't negotiate with absolutely insane Islamic fundamentalists.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Exactly, and what Donald Trump has asked them to do is something that they will find totally unacceptable, and therefore Donald Trump will have known that beforehand, so he knows what's happening. Friday night or sometime over this weekend.
You reckon? Yeah. I was thinking, I'm writing a column on this for The Sun. I'm thinking by the time people read it, we may already be involved. Although, again, I just think Keir Starmer and David Lammy will just pussyfoot around.
And on one of the tweets where it said we shouldn't get involved and all the rest of it, Iran controls the Straits of Hormuz. 30% of all our oil and gas products go through the Straits of Hormuz. We are involved.
Again,
it impacts us.
Before we were involved in Ukraine, still affected us. Yes. I know, exactly. I'm afraid, we may be an island nation, but no man is an island. Correct. We can't escape it. 11:32 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Do keep those calls coming in on all the topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to talk to the brilliant Stephen Wolfe about the latest well, just a general madness on channel migrants. They arrive, we can't stop them arriving, we can't get rid of them either. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:34 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about where we are with the latest madness on migration and asylum. And as always, there are plenty of stories to pick from. Let's talk about it with Stephen Wolfe. He's a former MEP, of course, and now director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. A very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, it's lovely weather for us here in the UK, and of course even better weather if you're trying to get across to the UK. And we've seen yet more migrants coming across from Calais, and yet more failure by the French police to actually stop people. And what I thought was particularly extraordinary was their inability to stop a man who was on a crutch to get into a migrant dinghy.
Well, Julia, it's a wonderful day here, and whilst we're thinking about having a glass of vino or beer with our friends, the people smugglers are thinking, how do they enhance the 90 million that they've made this year along, while piling in all those scientists, doctors, engineers and titans of industry to help us with growth onto those very small boats. But what I did love was that story that we picked up. It's the man who identified as a submarine, obviously using his walking stick as an aid to skip past the French police with ease and then swim across to one of those boats. Yes, the French police showing their entente with us. Absolute joie de vivre and life with us by enabling someone who could hardly walk to get past them and come across.
Well,
us.
indeed.
But it just goes to show they don't want them. They want us to have them.
Quite right. Although, again, I've always thought it was crazy the French not to act on this, because actually a lot of migrants make their way into France with the intention of coming to Britain, but they wouldn't be making their way into France and setting up camp sometimes for weeks at a time, even months at a time in northern France, if they weren't coming to us. And that, I just think they're crazy, because we know one of the reasons they don't want to stay in France, they want to come here because we're the El Dorado, because you get your house and your room and board, and let's face it, you'll never be deported, you'll get to stay. Whereas in France, you don't even get a translator to make your case.
No.
Maybe we should learn a lesson. Rather than giving all that money to the French, what is it, 800 million so far in the last few years to try and stop the boats. They're still not doing it. We're hoping for that change in the law, though, aren't we? That they will actually wade out a few yards into the sea to stop the boats. Do you think that will happen?
Well, I'm not sure it will happen. The French do love a way of just delaying things. And as I say, they have taken nearly $1 billion off us since around 2014, when we first started giving them cash for camps, as I like to call it, and cash for doing nothing, cash for camps. And I just think sometimes, we look at them, and logic does dictate that if we stop them coming in at Calais and coming to the UK, the French would have less of a problem on their own borders. Yep. But that would mean then having to go and deal with other countries like Italy and Greece. And we have lessons. We can watch what the Hungarians do. Orbán recently spoke about how he's giving €1 million a day to the European Union and say, because I'm not going to accept any of them. And so he doesn't have any terrorist attacks in that country. He doesn't have any grooming gangs in his country. And he doesn't have the level of mass migration and hotels being filled up. We look at Donald Trump, who's now looking to try and increase 1 million people deported a month, and he's stopped the borders, the mass borders. 350,000 a month used to come across. He's getting none now. So deterrent works, we just don't believe in it.
Yeah, and the thing is, we're always running to catch up with the latest tactic being used. And we closed down, well, we didn't close down completely, but we shut down to the mass use of the Eurotunnel and people getting onto trains or getting onto the backs of lorries. It's still going on, but nothing like the scale it was. They put up the fencing, they dealt with that eventually. Then they got onto the beaches, and so then they started this tactic or that tactic. But their tactics are always changing. They're finding new ways of circumventing the French police, whether they bring the dinghies, on the car to the beach and then people get in, or whether they sail the dinghies from elsewhere to the beach and then the people who are paying them have to swim out to get on. Whatever the rule change is, they will adapt.
They will, and we've had, as you quite rightly pointed out, they're still coming on an airplane, boat, and the backs of lorries. And since 2018, the research I'll probably publish towards the end of the week will show that there's about 300,000 who've done that. But what I'm looking at now is the agreement that seems to be pushing really headlong in Europe, where they have these transit camps in France where they're going to have safe routes, where the people smugglers all across France can guide their people into these French ports and areas, ports of safety, where we will then accept lots of asylum seekers from France in return that we send back people to France. I mean, the logic is just... It's mind-boggling.
And because we're one of the bigger, richer countries in Europe, although not in the EU anymore, we'll probably have to take more than we'll be able to send back.
Oh, absolutely. In QED, that's what happened before we had Brexit. That's exactly what was happening then.
I mean, it's a brilliant idea, and I'm absolutely sure that Keir Starmer will happily sign up to it. It's madness. Thing is, the main issue we've got is we need to stop people coming in because for some reason we're unable to get rid of them. It's very bizarre. I mean, Germany's been closing their borders. They've cut the number of people entering their country very, very, very significantly. But once people are here, we don't seem to get rid of them, even though our law, quite clearly, all your human rights law allows us to get rid of people who've been, for instance, convicted of being a grooming gang member, of mass rape of young underage girls. And this has been the case with two men, Kwari Abdul Rauf and Adil Khan. They're two of Britain's worst grooming offenders. They were sentenced for their part in the Rochdale child grooming scandal and rape scandal. They, of course, weren't jailed for long enough. They were jailed in 2012, and again didn't get anything like as much time as they should have done. But the idea is they're supposed to be deported to Afghanistan, to Pakistan. Turns out, though, they tore up their passports. They have renounced their Pakistani nationality or dual nationality, so we can't make them stateless. We can't get rid of them. And the Pakistani authorities are going, well, what can we do? So we're stuck with these people. I mean, this is mind-blowing.
Oh, it is, and this puts into a kind of real context of what's happening in the United States. If you remember with Colombia, it said, we're not going to accept anyone back, Mr. Trump. You can go and swing from a tree. And he turned around and said, OK, you're not allowing anyone to come into the country from Colombia. I've stopped all visas immediately, and I'm going to send anyone back from the universities to do so as well. Yeah. And what we've got with deals such as Pakistan is we fund them, we do donate money to them, and the Foreign Office will squeal. They'll say if we don't fund these people, they'll start running off to China and they'll become their best mates. And that's where it all gets mixed up. What's more important is being able to deport those criminals who are people not only the products of people smugglers, but also the products of being grooming gang evil individuals. We shouldn't want them in this country at all, and we should do whatever we can and ignore the Foreign Office and say, sorry, language there.
Happy with that.
But we should turn around and say to them, get back to Pakistan. And Pakistan, if you don't like it, we're not going to give you any funding. We're not going to support you anyway.
And we're also not going to allow a single visa. I mean, which frankly, I think is one of the things I'd want to do anyway. I want to come on to that, but I want to bring another case as well, because I saw this yesterday and it absolutely blew my mind. An asylum seeker from Afghanistan, so another economic migrant from Afghanistan, he entered the UK illegally in 2021, and in October 2023, he just basically approached a 15-year-old girl in Falkirk town centre, made some lewd remarks and then dragged her behind a pub and raped her. He's been convicted of that crime and he was jailed for 9 years. So it's 12-year extended sentence. Of course, he won't serve anything like that. Of course he won't. I mean, it's just rape of a child. But the most extraordinary thing was the defence that was given, which was, 9 years in custody followed by 3 years on licence, apparently. And he'll go on the sex offenders register and at the end of his sentence, he should be deported. But we know he won't be deported. But part of the defence given was by Defence Counsel Janice Green. She told the court there were language difficulties. So when she was saying, I'm only 15, apparently, he wasn't quite sure it was rape. But she said there were also a cultural barrier between this man, Sadiq Nigzad, his home country, where child marriage was common. And she said, I'm not suggesting that means he reasonably believed she was consenting, but that there's a reason why he could have misunderstood. Now, she, like many women who were attacked, and girls who were attacked, basically went silent and dazed, because a lot of women know they don't fight back, they don't shout, they are so shocked by what's happening to them, and the urge to stay alive is more important than anything else at that point. This is a very common response. But the idea that he thought, because he was from Afghanistan, that a girl could just be approached and grabbed and taken behind a pub and raped, that's a culture difference that apparently needed to be taken into account by the court. That's disgusting and appalling, isn't it?
Well, we're quite rightly disgusted. We're quite rightly horrified by it. And in a way, I don't blame the barrister for this, for having to put that
You're a
case.
barrister yourself, aren't you?
Yeah. So if your client says that's his defence and that's what he understands, then you have to put that forward. And so I'm sure that she felt disgusted by actually having to say it. I know many barristers have done so. Not myself, thankfully. But in those circumstances, there are a number of things from this, Julia, isn't it? If we're saying that that is the cultural difference and that's what they understand, how can those on the left argue that their culture is compatible with ours?
Yeah, this is the conversation we had yesterday with a former Labour Party representative. And this is the thing, when two cultures, A, they're not the same, B, they're not morally of equal value, and C, when they do clash, pick a side, and I pick our values. And this is the thing, something you talked about for many years, and you do this great work at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, that we were told for years the lie that mass immigration was bringing us untold economic benefits. Clearly hasn't. And you have to look at productivity, and you have to look at the state of our finances and the like. Clearly not. And loads of statistics now making it really clear that is not the case for the vast majority of people who come to this country. We were told that, multiculturalism and diversity is our strength. Again, no evidence for this whatsoever. I'm getting to the point, and I think the British people are getting to the point, we've discussed it a bit earlier with Philip Ingram, my guest in the studio, that people are hitting a breaking point now, not just with the grooming gangs, not just with, people coming legally here, like Axel Rudiger-Barner's parents and others, that we are importing a lot of people from cultures, from places war-torn or poverty-stricken places we just don't want here. And I think a lot of people are getting to the point when we need to move into Trumpian territory in terms of, maybe there are some countries where we don't want anyone to come from. Where are you on that?
Well, I think for some time I've been saying that there are the top 9 countries that lead to the largest number of people coming as asylum claims legally, which is Afghanistan, Somalia, Iran and Iraq. And I'm of the view that we no longer should be allowing any visas to come in at all. I know, again, we look at the Foreign Office and the Treasury. We'll balk at that. We say we want to have their university students in, or we want to have the elites kids being taught at Sandhurst so that we have good friends at that. But at the end of the day, I think we should be adopting a view that now we've not only had so many from those countries that we've quite clearly seen here as a case of cultural difference that doesn't work, but also the Casey report, finally, or rather the Casey review, has indicated that we've got 25% of those who are committing these crimes were illegal migrants and asylum seekers.
Yeah.
That there was a destruction of our own culture by ignoring criminality because we didn't want to offend. We also didn't have proper research, the sort of numbers that we've been saying are there. And all of that is a destruction of our own nation's cultural kind of history and our ability to be who we are because we want to accept. And the view is, in my view, for a long time, we've got to slow down, if not stop immigration from certain countries so that we can catch up, so that we can rebalance, so that we can understand, integrate where we can,
educate
those that come.
Educate. And if you don't want to be educated and change your views, then bye-bye. Stephen Wolfe, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Brief word from Philip Ingram, listening to all of that.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we had some way of, as people come into this country illegally, they're taken out immediately and then processed overseas, like Rwanda. Now, if Keir Starmer's, and he's proved that he can do U-turns, he should do a U-turn on that and make it a much better programme. So instead of the few hundred that the
call
Tories
it something else. We'll pretend not to notice. I had no faith that the Tories were going to do it. I have no faith whatsoever Labour are going to do it. They haven't got their hearts in it at all. I even wonder if we get reform at the next election, whether they would even though they would absolutely have their, have the will to do it, whether they would even be able to do it. I think the battles against the blob and the lawyers is so great. We need such a fundamental change to how our country is run. To get all that done. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, also your thoughts in Iran, and indeed on what our next guest is going to have to say in just a couple of moments. We're going to talk about the Notting Hill Carnival. Is it time to get rid of the Notting Hill Carnival altogether because of the policing cost, or should we help fund more for that policing cost? And those latest statistics showing just how much overcrowded prisons are costing not just fellow prisoners, but prison officers in terms of the dangers they face. That's up next. This is Talk.
There is no worse charge you can make against the government than your policies are endangering the women of this country. And that is the fact of the matter.
That is the reality.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the reality. And I think that immigration, the failures of having a well-ordered immigration system, and I have to make this point as well, that many of these failures are happening in the post-Brexit context. This is not what Leave voters had in mind.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. 11:51 is the time. Don't forget, we're going to get that interest rate decision from the Bank of England in just about 9 minutes' time. Expected to hold interest rates despite inflation sort of creeping up again. We'll talk to you about that a little bit later. First up, though, let's talk about where we are with the latest on our justice system. David Shipley is a writer and researcher on prison and justice issues and joins us now. Very good morning to you, David.
How are you?
Thank you very well indeed. Thank you so much for joining us. We're coping in the heat and the air conditioning is finally sort of kicked in. But the stats out today from the Ministry of Justice at 9:30 this morning showing that violence is rife in our prisons. We've known that certainly for a long time. There's attacks at Axel Rudolph, people burning oil, boiling water and the like. But the rate of prisoner-on-prisoner assaults in men's prisons increasing by 11% in 2024, up by 13% when it's prisoners on prison staff over the same period. And this is being put down to just incredibly overcrowded prisons, understaffing, under-resourced, under-experienced prison officers, and 99 point God knows what percent capacity. What do you make of those latest statistics?
Yeah, I mean, the increase in violence is sadly unexpected, as expected. Our prisons get more and more violent every year. and that is terrible for prisoners. And it's also terrible for rehabilitation, because actually, if you're scared of being attacked by the man you share a cell with or on the wing, your ability to emotionally or psychologically engage with rehabilitation programs, with training, with education is really difficult. If you're spending your whole night sleeping or trying to sleep terrified, you won't be able to study the next day. It's also terrible for staff. The staff are suffering an increasing rate of quite serious assaults as well.
Yeah.
And I was really struck when I went to the Prison Officers Association conference about 6 weeks ago. Every officer there had been assaulted again. It was just
on what planet would we accept that in any of our workplaces as a normal state of affairs? Now, of course, there are particularly violent men behind bars. I suppose you're never going to get rid of that violence completely. But is it just about overcrowding? And what is it? I mean, you're a former prisoner yourself, aren't you? What is it about overcrowding which leads to a greater number of attacks?
Well, in this study today that they've released, the MOJ had specifically looked at doubling up in cells. So when you have a cell which is really supposed to be for one person, they put two men in there. And that can be a real source of tension. You're talking about a space roughly the size of a car parking space. And in there you've got a bunk bed.
2 men in there.
Yeah, 2 men living in there, the bunk bed, your toilet's there, you eat your food there, you live there maybe 22 hours a day.
Yeah.
Not many relationships, even really harmonious ones, would get through that without some argument. So you can imagine you put 2 strangers who might be dealing with a lot of their own issues.
Drug issues, mental health.
There might be drug issues.
Yeah.
And they might be very contradictory principles. I'll never forget once in Wandsworth when I was there, they put a man who was a vegan, and we knew he was a vegan because he had vegan tattooed on his neck, in a cell with an older chap who wasn't a vegan. And on that first night, the older chap went to eat his food, which had meat in it. The vegan said, "You're not eating that around me, I can smell it." And the older guy said, "I'm going to eat my food, I'm not bothering you." And that became a huge fight, and the older man ended up being hospitalised. And that's the sort of friction points that can come. You have a lot of people with very poor impulse control in prison.
Yeah,
so it's not
that's why they're there. And again, the solution is better prisons. And again, we want people to be rehabilitated and to not, and to get educated and to get off drugs and things like that. We're going to have to provide better prison facilities, and we can't have them locked up 22, 23 hours a day. And we can't have so few inexperienced staff dealing with. No one should go to work expecting routinely to be attacked.
They shouldn't. And if you look at the rates of violence prison officers suffer, they're appalling. And the rates of poor mental health, even there's some data around sort of suicide rates amongst prison officers, they're really bad. And I think that's a big issue. It's not just overcrowding, it's that the prison service lost a lot of the more experienced staff over the last decades, essentially because of Tory efforts to drive down the pensions liability. So they pushed out a lot of the more experienced staff. So if you go back 10 years ago, 2/3 of prison officers had been on the wing for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Now I think it's less than 20%. So
that's
if you're a
really
new
heading. They've got the experience, they've got the gravitas, they've got the respect. They can manage people. We all know it's even at school, which is largely crowd control now. The teacher who could walk into the room and everyone goes, "Ooh, uh-oh." It's very different, isn't it? Yeah. Can I get to another topic, though, as well? I just want to talk to you. There's a report out today about Notting Hill Carnival, and in a letter to the Culture Secretary, the organisers of the annual summer festival held in West London say they need extra money to go ahead because of risks compromising public safety. They need extra funding for security, for the police. It's already costing an absolute fortune, millions in public money, and yet we still have, mass rates of violence, 8 stabbings last year, 2 people who died in the violence last year's carnival. Do you think that we should provide that extra funding?
No. I mean, I looked up the data for this before I came on, actually, and the Metropolitan Police estimate it cost them almost £12 million to police carnival in 2023. It's a huge amount of overtime.
Are there other areas of London not being policed properly at that time?
Also, right, and it is a violent event. There was a mother who was murdered while her daughter was standing next to her
on the family day.
On the family day, yeah, and I think really it does draw in a lot of violence and a lot of criminality. I think they probably just need to move, if you want to keep doing it, to ticket it in Hyde Park with proper security.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, certainly I think what a lot of people who live around Notting Hill would like. I used to live near there. People board up their homes. I mean, the public urination, people having sex in on your stairwell, the violence. I mean, I used to go many, many years ago, and then it got so overcrowded. I remember being stuck in a bit. We felt like we were being kettled. I genuinely worried that I was not going to be able to breathe. I thought we are 2 minutes away from a mass casualty event. I'm out of here.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think there's, people will make arguments about heritage and this sort of thing, but actually, at some point, you've got to make a decision on risk to life, to property, and just the cost. And 12 million quid a year, when we've got a really financially, struggling police force at the moment, just seems a very bad.
I wonder what other
money.
event would get that sort of funding, let alone more of it. David Shipley, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much, writer and researcher on prison and justice issues. Philip Ingram, do you want to come back on either? We talked about Notting Hill already, but also the prisons.
Yeah, well, the prisons, there's a constant problem across our whole criminal justice system, and no government has addressed it in the past, and this government is doing nothing to address it now.
We'll just have more and more cuts.
And until they grip it, then we're going to be putting problems back into society.
Well, you talked earlier about things like migration and people just having and the grooming gangs, things like people have just reached a point where we're done now. Yeah. I feel that we are there on criminality issues as well.
I think everything is coming to a head, and there is a storm brewing, and I hope the politicians are seeing it, because that storm, everything is going to come together.
I think they can get away with saying a few things and a few little announcements.
Soundbites aren't going to stop it.
People have, and they talk about how we have to feel it. No, it has to be real. It has to be real. People need to know. Yeah. People want to be able to walk down the street and not have their phone stolen. People want to be able to feel safe. They want their daughters to feel safe on the street, and we're going to have to tackle the prison issue. And the number of prison places they're building is not enough.
It's not enough.
I don't know why anyone would work as a prison officer now, because a lot of people talk about it's actually a very rewarding job.
Yes.
Turning people's lives around, helping people, and a lot of people are really damaged who are in prison.
Yeah.
But
well, look at David and what he's contributed to the programme today.
Absolutely. Yeah, as a former prisoner himself. Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a depressing show. I'm blaming Philip for that.
Yeah.
Come on, give us a call. Give us a call and cheer us up. We'll get the
depressing.
interest rate decision. It's almost likely, always widely expected to be no change. That'll be some good news for some people. He's not going up. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're also going to be talking to the former UK ambassador to Iran, Sir Richard Dalton, about whether or not the UK should get involved in assaults on Iran. We'll talk about that next. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people, because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, great to have your company. Great also to have the company. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, joins us always on a Thursday. Lots to talk about with you today, obviously, particularly whether Britain should join any US attack on Iran alongside Israel. Donald Trump has said he's approved a plan to attack Iran, but is yet to give a final order. Should we join in? You've been getting in touch. Lots more calls I want to get to in this hour. 0344 499 1000. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. But also just to let you know, the Bank of England has held the base rate at 4.25%. That was what most economists and city folk were expecting. Rising food prices, over 4% inflation in food prices at the moment, and the risk of an oil price surge due to tensions in the Middle East have put pressure on the bank not to carry on making cuts too quickly. I don't think anyone felt they were happening too quickly if they've got a big mortgage, but there we are. I know a lot of people coming off fixed rates a couple of years ago, absolutely horrified by what they were facing, but Bank of England has held the base rate of the interest rates at 4.25%, as was expected. Also in this hour, we are going to be talking about the Royal College of Psychiatrists warning that the assisted dying bill, which is going to be voted on by MPs in the Commons tomorrow, it does not meet the needs of patients. They say they've also expressed concerns about a shortage of qualified psychiatrists to take part in dealing with assisted dying panels. Plus, the EU is plotting to increase fees for British tourists entering the bloc to help pay off its COVID lockdown debts. Officials are considering hitting non-EU travellers with an increased levy to reduce the €350 billion common debt accrued by pandemic-era shutdowns. Don't worry. We'll pay for it. You're welcome. But there we are. Don't forget, if you've missed anything of the show, you want to hear anything or watch anything again, I don't know, someone might want to, you can go to my YouTube page. Now, how could I find your YouTube page, you might be asking yourself. We've had a cunning plan about that. We've called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Makes it easy to find, doesn't it? So you've got no excuse. Hit subscribe so you don't ever miss a thing. Right, so much to talk about. Philip Ingram, as I say, is here. In just a moment, we'll talk to the former UK ambassador to Iran. We've been talking all morning about whether or not, Donald Trump, he said he's approved a plan to attack Iran, but he hasn't decided yet whether he will or whether he won't. He won't decide until the last second. Will I? Won't I? But crucially, we're asking whether Britain should join an attack on Iran. I would say, certainly looking at social media and the calls we've had so far, Philip, it seems to be kind of a 50-50. But again, how representative that is, I don't know.
Well, we're already supporting the United States. From the territories that they're using. The B-2 bombers are based in Diego Garcia. The US air assets are based in RAF Lakenheath and other bases around the UK. They are using RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, which is a permanent aircraft carrier per se in the region. We're providing other support throughout the region that the Americans can't do as well. That'll help them with their targeting and other things. And we have, whenever the Americans have flown in the area dealing with attacks from the Houthis and elsewhere, we've provided RAF fighter jets to join in those attacks. Yeah. I don't think any would join in attacks into Iran, but we've provided air tankers for the fleet that's there.
We're already involved.
And we're already involved, and we're going to be involved, full stop.
Very interesting. Well, let's get your thoughts. Don't forget to get your calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. And let's also get the thoughts of my next guest. As I say, the former UK ambassador to Iran from 2003 to 2006, Sir Richard Dalton, joins us now. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. Do you think that we will join any US attack on Iran if that happens? And do you think we should?
No, I don't think we will, because Mr. Starmer has recently had it stated on his behalf that he will observe international law, and an American attack, like the Israeli attack, would be an illegal aggression. There was no justification for a preemptive attack within the terms of international law because the threat was not imminent. There was no Iranian dash for a bomb. There was no sword at Israel's throat, which was the language Israel used to use to justify their self-defense action, and everybody would support them if indeed the sword was at their throat, in the sense that Iran was planning a nuclear or conventional attack. But Iran was not. So as I understand law, use of Diego Garcia or British bases for supporting B-2 bombers with bunker busters to attack Iran would be an illegal act. We would be declaring war on a country, and our own facilities would thereby legitimately be subject to self-defense retaliation by Iran.
Now, as you will know, there are many different interpretations of not just domestic law, but international law. I know that it's been reported, although not confirmed, that Lord Hermer, the Attorney General appointed by Keir Starmer to this government, has apparently advised that he believes Britain could not get involved on those international war grounds. But you're saying this is your view, that the Israeli attack was illegal under international law?
No, it's an absolutely clear position, and so far the British government has avoided commenting on it because it would be inconvenient to do so, because it would annoy President Trump.
Well, would it not also annoy some of our European allies?
The British government has said also that there is no military solution to this issue, that there is no way of ending Iran's nuclear program by military means, and that diplomacy is required. That was a clear statement 4 days ago in Parliament by the British Foreign Secretary, and if they follow through on that policy, which I think they are now trying to do in meetings with the Iranian Foreign Minister tomorrow in Geneva, then that would suggest to me strongly that they're not willing to break international law by invading or bombing or assisting others to bomb Iran.
I genuinely don't think that David Lammy's assessment of things is usually the strongest and most valid assessment of any situation from my previous experience with him. Saying there's no military solution to a hostile nation state that has said that they want to annihilate not just Israel, but also the big Satan, the US, and the little Satan, the UK. And they have been developing nuclear weapons there. Even the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency, has said they now have enriched uranium to a point where it's got no possible use in any domestic nuclear energy production. It's can only be used in the military. They've made it very clear. And they've said they are in breach, the first time in 20 years, clear breaches of their responsibilities under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Given that they've said they want to annihilate Israel, they want to annihilate the US and Britain, and let's face it, the West, and they are developing a weapon that if they did get to the point where it was able to be used, not just Israel, but the world would be at risk. And given that this government is run by insane Islamic fundamentalists, including Ayatollah Khamenei, I would have thought it was really bleeding obvious that the solution was a military one, not a diplomatic one, and that they must be stopped.
Yes, and no doubt the Pope has fathered 100 children. I mean, you are making quite absurd exaggerations about Iran. Iran is not a country that is capable, as in your words, of destroying the West, of destroying the United States. Iran has no nuclear weapons program. That is the finding of the US.
Why are they enriching uranium to a military level?
That is the finding of the US intelligence community as lately as a published document in March, which I think everybody trying to analyze this situation needs to read. And no evidence has emerged subsequently of any weaponization activity that would justify the kind of language that you are using.
Why would Israel do what they've done if they didn't believe?
They have had a plan for decades to attack Iran because Iran is an enemy of Israel, which is wrong. Nobody endorses the refusal of Iran to recognize the state of Israel. Iran's rhetoric about Israel is foul and has created this pseudo-justification for an attack on it. But you still have to look at the wording of international law if you wish other countries to respect international law in their dealings with you. That is the matter of basic self-interest in the survival of the United Kingdom that you can't pick and choose and say other countries should observe international law when it comes to us or when it comes to causes we disapprove of.
I find
Ukraine, but that we won't hold them to that standard in causes that we do approve of.
I'm sorry, but okay, at what point does Israel, you say, well, you know, Israel seems to think this and it's unjustified. Iran has said they want to annihilate Israel. They are clearly building a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's quite...
No, they are not clearly building a nuclear weapon. What is your evidence? You have no such evidence.
The IAEA has said they're enriching uranium to a military-grade level. Why would they be doing that? What possible reason? Well, they're going to give it away at birthday parties? What are they going to do it for?
Are you a serious person or not? The fact is you need to understand the context of this long dispute.
I do understand the context of this long dispute.
It goes back to 2003, and there has been a campaign of sanctions against Iran. There was a perfectly satisfactory nuclear deal which was trashed by the United States in 2018, and yet more oppression and suffering experienced amongst the Iranian people. Now, rightly or wrongly, the Iranians chose to exert leverage to get back into a negotiation under which their intentions not to develop nuclear weapons would be validated once more. And they chose as a means of pressure this enrichment of uranium beyond the level that they need for their civil nuclear programs. That is the reason they've been enriching.
I genuinely, I'm quite stunned, Sir Richard, by your willingness to sort of to believe the Iranian mullahs and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard over others. But we are talking.
I'm believing that U.S. intelligence estimates that Iran has not taken a decision to develop nuclear weapons. Now, President Trump is seeking to set that aside.
To have the capability.
But it still remains
They want to have the capability to do so. But they've also been funding, quite separately, they've also been funding Hamas, who attacked Israel, Hezbollah, who attacked Israel on October the 8th after the attack in 23, the Houthi rebels who've been attacking international shipping and attempting to send bombs to Israel in the last year or so. They have been funding pretty much all of the Middle East terrorism and much terrorism even on our shores as well. They are clearly a state that has no... You know, it's certainly not. Iran is, and the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. The Iranian regime is certainly not one that is widely welcomed in the Middle East. And there are many political leaders and even dictators in the Middle East who, whatever they say publicly for the benefit of their own people, are secretly rather pleased that Israel has dealt with this threat, hopefully once and for all.
That is your allegation, but those states in the Gulf and elsewhere have all condemned Israel's actions. They are terrified of the anarchy that would flow from realizing Israel's intention to destroy the Islamic regime. Also, you and others who advocate war have forgotten the lessons of Afghanistan and Iraq.
You've forgotten the lessons of Syria, I would say.
How did those end up?
No, how did Syria end up?
Disaster.
How did Syria end up, sir?
Well, we weren't involved in Syria.
Exactly. And how did Syria end up? You saying I'm forgetting Iraq and Afghanistan.
What's the point you're making?
We didn't. We got involved in those wars, and there was a lot of chaos and death and destruction that came out of them. We didn't get involved in Syria. A lot of chaos and death and destruction came out of Syria. Whether we get involved or not. You say I'm an advocate for war. I'm not an advocate for war. I'm an advocate for peace. But Israel...
No, you're not. You're endorsing attacking Iran.
No, I'm endorsing Israel's ability, and our only ally that is a democracy in the Middle East's ability to be kept safe from the threat of Iran.
Israel is kept safe from the threat of Iran by its overwhelming conventional military dominance. Secondly, by its nuclear deterrence, the possession of 90 nuclear warheads. And thirdly, by the American security umbrella. as the interview with former Prime Minister of Israel, Olmert, a few weeks ago made absolutely clear, Israel is fundamentally a secure state. Now, it is subject to military threats. I'm not denying that, and those threats are wrong. But we are entitled to question the means which Israel and the United States choose to deal with those threats. Because, as those failed military interventions, which I mentioned, show, that you can start a war, but it's bloody difficult to end it on satisfactory terms. And one of the risks, of course, is that if a nuclear state like Israel and another one like the United States attacks a non-nuclear state like Iran, what is going to happen to the nuclear non-proliferation regime? Both Iran and many other countries are going to conclude that they need nuclear weapons too.
As many have. But that's the trouble, isn't it? Because that's the conclusion of the likes of Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and he was able to get nuclear weapons, and now he's untouchable because of it, which is why it's very important to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
And the way to do that is by the resumption of diplomacy, which, thank God, the 11th hour, the British government and others appear to be trying. Now, I don't know why you smirk at me like that when I talk about potential peaceful solutions.
I don't think there is a potential peaceful solution with mad Islamic fundamentalists who want the death and destruction of Israel, America and Britain.
They are realistic people. The Islamic Republic has a mission in the world, whether we like it or not, and they know perfectly well that they are subject to annihilation by Israel. Which
is why they keep funding attacks on Israel.
If they are subject to annihilation by Israel, if they launch any form of nuclear attack on...
Why should Israel take that risk?
On Israel, they are deterred.
Why should Israel take that risk? We wouldn't take that risk if it was us, if it was an ally, if it was a state near us. I mean, they're not the neighbouring state, we know. But if we face the same sort of threat, existential threat, we would act, and we have done in the past.
There is no existential threat from Iran to Israel at present.
At present. So how close does it have to be for it to be acceptable to you that Israel should act?
I think I go back to this statement that so many Israelis themselves make, which is that we have a right to attack when the sword is at our throat. That is not my language. That is Israeli military and strategic thinking. And that is what they used to say when they weren't under this present extremist government. And everybody, including me, would support them in that event. So nobody is trying to deprive Israel of its right of self-defense. We're simply saying that it's in Israel's interest and the interest of the rest of the world to do so in accordance with international law.
All right. Now, sir, I didn't ask you about this in advance, so I absolutely accept your right to not stay on the line. But I have Philip Ingram, MBE, who's a former senior military intelligence officer in the studio. Would it be okay if he put some points to you for you to respond? If you choose not to, that's absolutely fine, because I didn't have a chance to ask you about that before the interview. You agreed to an interview with me.
No,
but would you be
by all means.
Great, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Philip Ingram, I know you've been itching to get involved, so do have your say.
Yeah, Sir Richard, there's a few things in what you've been saying. Existential threat by Iran to Israel. Iran's sponsorship of Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, who have been attacking Israel on a daily basis, would constitute an existential threat. The interpretation of an immediate threat when we're looking at things from a nuclear perspective, do you wait until there's a nuclear warhead? Do you wait until the nuclear warhead is attached to a delivery device? Or do you wait till that nuclear warhead has been fired and explodes over a target before you take it as an immediate threat? So that's an interpretation. We've been trying to separate military activity from diplomacy. Military activity, war is diplomacy by other means. It's setting the conditions where diplomacy has failed, and you're setting the conditions to get back to diplomacy again. It's not done in isolation. Donald Trump has set his conditions out. We've got the meetings between the European leaders that are going to happen that will continue that diplomacy. But if Iran continues to reject the diplomatic approaches, something else has to happen. And military is part of that wider diplomacy. These are the issues that I have with it.
OK. Sir Richard Dalton, do you want to respond?
Well, of course, diplomacy has two sides. And the Americans have rejected Iranian attempts at diplomacy, and we have a deadlock at the 6th round of talks. Now, anybody who's dealt with Iran over a long period knows that these issues are intensely complex, and the way you provide proper assurance that Iran will never have the ability to divert nuclear materials for military purposes is through a very complex series of limitations and monitoring and supervision. Now, that is within the capability of the international community to reinstate. And Mr. Trump himself, shortly before the Israeli attack, was saying that the diplomacy had promise. So to suggest that somehow the deadlock a week or two ago was a deadlock forever, and that the world community as a whole, including Israel and the United States, couldn't be satisfied with something different, is simply wrong and dangerous. Now, Israel, of course, is very skeptical of the international diplomatic endeavors.
I wonder why.
From their attempt to sabotage the JCPOA, which everybody else agreed was working to achieve the objective of ensuring Iran never had a nuclear weapon. But unless you are basically welcoming the kind of chaos and destruction and suffering that war brings, diplomacy must be given a further chance.
Okay. What about, just finally, on a slightly different note, you're talking about, obviously, yeah, the concern is, you topple Saddam Hussein, you get chaos in Iraq, you topple the Taliban in Afghanistan. That didn't work out too well. They're back in power, even stronger than ever. But there is obviously a risk in toppling the Iranian leadership. However, Iran is a different country, much larger, much more sort of established structures in that country than both of those countries. There is also the concern for the people living under the Iranian regime right now, particularly women, subjugated, girls beaten, even murdered for not even covering their heads properly. Many in the Iranian population desperately wanting to be freed from the Iranian regime and the rule of the Revolutionary Guard. What about that argument?
It's not up to outsiders to do it. It happens to be against the law. And everybody in positions of authority in the countries you admire say that it's for the people of Iran to change their own government. Now, at the present, the effect of these attacks has been to deaden opposition to the regime, because everybody is trying to survive and they are rallying to their country, which is under attack. Now, when the dust has settled, maybe things will be different. Who can say? But the idea that creating the kind of destruction that you advocate in order to change a regime of a country like that should be an acceptable war aim of a country like the United Kingdom is utterly misguided.
Okay. I mean, personally, I think we have a moral duty to free subjugated people, but I'm old-fashioned like that. So, Richard Dalton, absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Really appreciate you joining us. Former UK ambassador to Iran, 2003 to 2006. Going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts on what he had to say. Philip is still itching to come back in. Give us some more. We've got to go to a break. Got to pay for all this. Pay for all this air conditioning in the studio. It's 12:25. Just coming at 12:26. We'll get your calls on this as well. Do stay tuned. Oh, also, before then, I'm just going to tell you what Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has had to say. Latest comments, a quick pooled interview. Nothing of much use, to be fair. He said the situation between Israel and Iran is fast moving. All of us are concerned with the nuclear programme Iran is developing. We completely recognise Israel's right to self-defence, but the principle is we need to de-escalate this. Let's have a conversation about that coming up next. This is Talk.
the United States is immensely powerful militarily and is therefore prepared to undertake actions which can hugely unbalance the world. The problem is it may be very powerful militarily and have the biggest and best bombs in the world, but it's proved to be very poor at building new states after it's destroyed the ones that existed before.
Yeah.
One thing, particularly of Iraq and also in Afghanistan, where all the efforts of the United States over many years were totally defeated by the Taliban, who are now back in charge. So is this wise? The obvious answer is no.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Lots of reaction, interestingly, coming into what our last guest, Sir Richard Dalton, had to say. Philip Ingram, I know, before I get to our calls, I know you wanted to speak.
I've got 3 quick points to put back to what Sir Richard said. First of all, intelligence assessments. The intelligence assessment that came out from the US saying that Iran wasn't making a nuclear weapon has been poo-pooed by a number of other US officials, including Donald Trump, but other intelligence assessments. Intelligence assessments are never gospel. It is someone making a view at a period of time, and the situation changes, and assessments can change.
But also, we do know that the Israelis, through the Mossad, they have the most extraordinary intelligence of what is going on. I mean, the fact that this is my favourite fact, that the Revolutionary Guard actually set up a body, an organisation, and appointed someone to head this organisation to basically seek out, to basically find out where there were Israeli agents in their intelligence and security forces, and they appointed a man who was a Mossad agent, an Israeli agent, to run the task force to reach people out like him. I mean, they have been at such a high level.
So the Israelis have got good intelligence. We've got good intelligence. We share it with the Americans and all the rest of it. Assessments can change. The second thing is the depth of the processing plant. Why is it hundreds of metres inside of a mountain if it's purely got civilian
It's for nuclear power.
Well, exactly, and therefore you don't waste billions of dollars in building that if you haven't got other.
And I mean, basically going hundreds of metres below a mountain.
The third thing is your Iranian state. Social media and posts of the last few days have had individuals stroking toy atomic bombs as threats. So that's an existential threat. And then my final piece is this is not about toppling the Iranian government and the Iranian regime. Lots of people want that. There's a lot of speculation around it. Any attack by the Americans and the Israelis and all the rest of it would be about setting the conditions to get back to diplomacy again, because Iran keeps rejecting the diplomatic efforts. That's what the military do. It sets the conditions to go, you're not listening to the talk.
So many people, and I'm worried that so many people, particularly in our own government and in our diplomatic field, seem to think there is this thing called diplomacy and talking, and then there's this thing called war, and they're completely separate. As you say, they are absolutely interlinked. It's frankly, it's bleeding terrifying that they don't get that. There we are. Let's get to your call. So 244 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. Peter's on the line in Bushey. And Peter, you were listening to our conversation with the former UK ambassador to Iran, and you wanted to have your say.
Yes, thank you very much, Julia. Well, watching him, I think the words that came to mind was smug, arrogant, complacent, and extremely naive. I mean, in all honesty, what does he expect Israel to do? So to get support, what does he want Iran to make an atomic bomb, fire it at Israel, and when it's on its way to Tel Aviv, say, "Oh, I think we'll support Israel now."
And he did say even he and many others would support Israel if they had the sword to them. But the reality is, people aren't supporting Israel even on day one. Even on day one after the October the 7th attacks, there were people who, even in our government, who weren't supporting Israel's right to self-defense. They say it, but they don't really mean it.
I think our government is an absolute disgrace, to be honest. To actually what they've done to two members of a democratically elected government, however bad you think they are, I think it's nothing short of a disgrace.
Yeah, and again, all the international bodies, that Israel's responsible for war crimes and all of this stuff. And again, they're fighting a war that the civilian death toll is far, far lower than it would be if we were fighting that war. I don't know. Are people just ignorant, Peter, or people just immoral or
ignorant. And I mean, I hate the way that the words genocide is bandied around. I hate the way Israel are acting against international law. Israel don't act against international humanitarian law, and all the nonsense that's been coming out about the about starving, poor starving Gazans, most of it is absolutely false.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm so ashamed of our own government and state broadcast that we have to fund the BBC playing along with it all. Thank you very much indeed for that call, Peter. Richard's on the line in Plymouth. He also wants to talk about that interview. Richard, what do you want to say? Oh, we just dropped that. We'll try and get him back on, but I've got some other messages I could read out about whether or not Britain should join an attack on Iran or not. I mean, Sir Richard Dalton was very clear. We shouldn't, because it would be in violation of international law. He believes the attack on Iran by Israel is. Christian says Trump is smart enough not to attack Iran. Well, I'm with you, Philip. I think we are probably going to be seeing an attack over the next couple of days. Tony says 100% Britain should join an attack on Iran. The UK is in a treacherous position with communists that support Iran, like Lord Hermer and co. Mick says no, keep out of something doesn't concern us, like Ukraine. Don't commit to boots on the ground. Waste of time. Susan says we don't want another forever war. We've got the caller back. Richard is back. He's in Plymouth. Richard, what did you want to say about that interview?
Well, I was going to say I do enjoy you very much, but that ambassador to Iran, you can see where his sympathies lie from the very beginning.
Where? Where do you think they lie?
With Iran. Definitely his sympathies are with Iran. We've been going on for this for 20 years. Why do they need nuclear energy?
I know, that's the sort of laughable bit, isn't it, really? But
it's ridiculous.
But as Philip just pointed out,
nuclear energy.
As Philip pointed out, if they want to use nuclear power, okay, fine, but they don't need to do any of their work on the nuclear power, apparently, hundreds of metres underneath mountains and hide what they're doing.
Well, they want it for the bomb. And when it's Iran, when it's Israel, then it'll be America, then it'll be us. We're non-Muslims. The rest of the way, and be honest, they don't care if they kill 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 or 10 million, because they're going to go to heaven with 27 virgins.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, actually. The Israeli ambassador on the show to the UK yesterday, she pointed out that, if they did annihilate Israel, they would take out the people of Gaza too. So they're not that bothered about the Palestinians they claim to care so much about. Thank you for that call, Richard. Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, and up next we're going to be talking to Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson about that assisted dying bill that's back in the Commons tomorrow. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. What a rip-roaring show it has been. Thank you for all your calls and texts. We'll try to get some more in the next half hour if we can. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. And let's turn our attention to something completely different now. Let's talk about the assisted dying bill. It was a private member's bill brought in by a Labour backbench MP, but it had to get through the first stage in Parliament. It's gone to the committee stage. It's coming back to Parliament for a big vote tomorrow. But it is absolutely fascinating how many people who, in principle, would support assisted dying legislation are very concerned about the actual details of this bill and how many medical bodies, the latest being the Royal College of Psychiatrists, who say this bill does not meet the needs, they say, of patients, and they are very unhappy with this bill going forward. We know that a number of MPs who had expressed some concerns but thought in principle they would look at the bill are now saying they will backtrack. But will this bill still go through? And should it? Well, let's talk about this with Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson now. She's a crossbench peer in the House of Lords, so she'll get to have her say in a vote when it does go to the House of Lords, if it does. She's also an 11-time Paralympic gold medalist. A very good afternoon to you, Baroness.
Oh, Tanni, thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. I forgot. I wanted to check beforehand. Do you mind if I call you Tanni? Thank you. Before we go into the details of this bill, I've seen you doing interviews on this topic before. Can you just explain what your view is in principle, ignoring this bill, in principle, towards and any sort of assisted dying, whether for people who are terminally ill or for people who have some severe disability as a result of an accident or a disease, which means that they are losing what they consider to be the valuable parts of their life? Well, what's your stance in principle?
So I'm against the principle, and you'll have heard me talk about I'm against this bill. I think postcode lottery is around palliative care. We don't get the right support you need. And actually something that you said as part of your introduction about, say someone's had a traumatic accident and they feel they've lost something. The general attitude to disabled people in this country is not great. There's ableism in education, housing, employment, healthcare, you name it, public transport. And so there's some data out this week from an organisation of disabled people where 67% of disabled people think they are likely to be coerced into ending their lives. So, you know, the principle's one thing. I don't want anyone to have a bad death. Yeah. But actually the detail is somewhat away from the principle.
And this is the thing, I come from a different point of view. I do believe in the principle and have campaigned and spoken about it many times for people who say that their life is not worth living. It is their choice, I believe, to have, you say, a good death, or someone with approaching severe dementia and just saying, you know, it's a conversation my family, I've had with my parents, my husband, about what we would consider a valuable life. Now, we may change our mind in different circumstances, and people would, but I share certainly your massive concerns about this particular bill. You mentioned two things there: the postcode lottery and palliative care. So people, you know, in one area they might get good care if they have they know they are dying, but actually in other areas they may not, and that may force them into certain decisions. But also the idea that people could be coerced, persuaded by maybe family members or others or doctors, you know, not well-meaning, to go into this process. So talk us through those concerns.
So as it stands at the moment, if this bill passes the Commons, and it can be amended in the Lords, because there's lots of people saying, no, the Lords can't amend it or they won't amend it.
It's the main job of the Lords, isn't it?
That is, well, I've also been told if this passes, no one else can amend it to change it to allow it for children or to change 6 months to 12 months. That is literally our job, is to amend legislation. So any doctor can raise ending a patient's life, no matter how vulnerable the patient or whether they have a learning disability. The bill as it stands says that doctors and the panel only have to be 51% sure that the patient is not being coerced or pressured, or they have to check whether they wish to die. There can be education campaigns to promote it. Private for-profit contractors can run the service with no profit cap and no transparency obligations. MPs won't be part of the next stage of it.
Yeah.
And currently the bill will auto-commence in 2029, no matter what training's been done or work is left undone or the state of palliative care. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
I mean,
each one of those alone would be enough of an issue, wouldn't it? I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, you're going to fund this, it's going to be a huge amount of funding, but we can't get enough funding for the palliative care that actually already exists for people who really, really need it. I mean, one of the things that the safeguards that I was encouraged by, and I'm like you, worried about the slippery slope element, but I was encouraged by the safeguard that there would be, you know, it would have to go to a court, a judge would have to oversee. There obviously were concerns raised that there simply aren't enough judges. The family courts will be bunged up for years. I mean, frankly, anyone who had, you're only supposed to be eligible if you have less than 6 months to live on doctors' reckoning. Often that will be wrong, obviously. That's another issue. But actually, you know, your chance of your case coming to court in those 6 months are very unlikely. And so that was just thrown out one day. by Kim Leadbeater, the MP behind this, and instead was replaced with a panel. Now, again, it's going to be like, I wonder if people who are opposed to abortion are working in abortion clinics. Probably not. I wonder if people who are opposed to assisted dying will be working on the panel to approve people for assisted dying. It seemed to me this was going to be a basic flaw in the system.
Yeah, so at the start, the judge was held up as this, amazing safeguard. And Ms Leadbeater had to apologise at second reading because she was asked directly, have you consulted current judges? And she came back and said, no, not current judges. The removal of judges is now called Judge Plus, which is literally Judge Minus. And then he said, oh, it's all right, because the psychiatrists will do it. Well, the Royal College of Psychiatrists have come out and said, absolutely no. So the people who'll be putting themselves forward on these panels will be people by very nature who support it. Yeah. So every jurisdiction has changed, whether by law or by practice. And, Canada's the worst of the worst. Canada's like just horrendous, where they allow it for anorexia, for being poor, for being homeless.
And people literally saying, I haven't got the money, I can't afford to carry on living. And that is just obscene that should happen. And we know it is happening.
Yeah, and it's proven. And we can't say, oh, well, it's not going to happen here. So the people who wanted to change the law are basing their figures on Oregon, which started in the 90s. It's a tiny US state. It's 4 million people. So when there was no social media, where there was no understanding, New Zealand, who've had the law very recently, have immediately come in way higher. So you can't just base it on one jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction is different.
Yeah, but we've seen a slippery slope in most of them. And again, the argument about slippery slope, of course the law will be... if the law can change this fundamental change, then it can change. Again, I come back to the issue that I disagree with you in terms of the principle, but one of my arguments about this was I don't support this law because I think it goes too far, but also I think it doesn't go far enough. So I would extend it to people who felt that the quality of their life due to disease or illness or disability, someone who was a quadriplegic who felt that was an untenable life for them, even though for someone else it was still a valuable, worth living life, that they would have that choice. Do you think that there is any argument ever where someone should have the right to choose the ending of their life, even if that is, say someone like me, I've got a good pension, but I just choose that I don't want to, slowly die of cancer, or if I start having dementia, that I decide I don't want to be a burden on, say, my husband and my daughter, and I make that choice fully cognizant, fully, and I can afford the care, I can afford everything else, but I make that choice that wasn't who I want to be or how I want to be remembered. Would you support that right?
Well, it's how you legislate for it. So, you can already have an advance directive. You can already, have conversations with doctor about where care carries on or stops. Mm-hmm. This bill will put a price on people's lives. And so at the moment, the doctors have the Hippocratic Oath. At some point, doctors will say, we've done enough. And then proper palliative care should kick in. And I've spent a lot of time talking to palliative care doctors who are saying, some of the scare stories, are just horrible. And there is no reason for somebody to die in pain. But where you give choice to one set of people, you take it away from others. So if you're poor, you're disabled, you can't get the right care, you get a pressure sore. And that is a condition that can be terminal. Yeah. You will think this is the only choice you have. And I think there's other things that we need to be doing first, not to kick the can down the road, but it's, if you get palliative care and you get support right, then that's a better place to be starting from.
But for most people, absolutely. Yeah. And again, if the decisions are going to be made differently based on whether someone's a millionaire or someone's living, in a one bed studio flat in a council estate, that is a very, very big concern to have. Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, really interesting to talk to you about this. Interesting that we come from such different points of view, but actually we're both, in that situation, we would slap down this law. I very much hope that MPs vote against it tomorrow, and I very much hope that the Lords are able to somehow stop it. I think this is an absolute horror story. This is a dying bill, similar to the abortion vote this week. Philip Ingram, you've been listening to all of that. Big thanks to Tanni Grey-Thompson, of course. Where are you standing on this, Philip?
I would like to have the choice, if my life got to a point where I had lost control of everything, to be able to choose legally.
What you would consider to be a life worth living.
Exactly, but the way this legislation is coming in, I've got the same concerns as Baroness Tammy. It's just not right, and bad legislation is worse than no legislation.
I mean, Kim Leadbeater, the MP behind that, I mean, the way they skewed the evidence that was heard before the committee. I mean, loads of bodies you would obviously you'd obviously speak to about these issues were not invited to give evidence. The evidence was massively skewed, like 80 or 90% to people who supported this issue. The sort of casual changing of, oh, that doesn't work, we'll go to something else. I mean, as she said, judge-led just dropped. One of the main reasons a lot of people like me said, oh, OK, we'll look at this is because it was judge-led. Yes. I can see the practicalities of it. The fact they didn't look into the practicalities of the family courts couldn't possibly do this shows how unthought through this law is, and it's such a fundamental moral change. It needs to be thought through. It's the slapdash approach to it that is just fundamentally wrong. Palliative care, again, we need to improve the palliative care across the country, because at the moment, doctors are killing people as part of palliative care. Because they know perfectly well that to control the pain by giving that additional pain relief is going to cause someone to go into unconsciousness. And often they have those conversations, but not so explicit that they could be.
Exactly, and it's a very difficult line, but it's done very carefully in this country, and we should put better protection for palliative care doctors and all the rest of it.
Absolutely.
But this isn't the answer.
This isn't the answer. I couldn't agree with you more. MPs, if you're watching, I know a lot of you watch and follow me on social media, including the government. I support assisted dying in principle. And frankly, I don't want religious people. I don't think the Catholics or Muslims or Christians. You don't get to say what I as an atheist get to do. I don't think you should be making laws. I don't accept that. And that's what's happened for many years and has prevented this from happening. But this law is not the right law. It goes the wrong way. It goes too far, and I think we will regret this till the end of our days, which would, by the way, be brought rather quicker for an awful lot of people if this goes through. Do not vote for this measure. 12:48 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking about going to the EU. They're trying to make it hard enough as it is with the passport controls and those they're going to do all that iris and fingerprint recognition. At some point, that will be coming in. Oh, but also now the EU wants to tax us and other travellers from outside the EU to pay off their COVID lockdown debts. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
The United States is immensely powerful militarily and is therefore prepared to undertake actions which can hugely unbalance the world. The problem is it may be very powerful militarily and have the biggest and best bombs in the world, but it's proved to be very poor at building new states after it's destroyed the ones that existed before. One thing particularly of Iraq and also in Afghanistan, where all the efforts of the United States over many years were totally defeated by the Taliban, who are now back in charge. So is this wise? The obvious answer is no.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 12:51 is the time. I'm going to talk about something rather easier than assisted dying for our final topic of the day. Going to be talking about the EU wanting to tax Brits and other travellers from outside the EU arriving in their countries, to pay for their huge COVID lockdown debts. That seems reasonable, doesn't it? Let's talk about this with travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minnow. A very good afternoon to you, Lisa.
Hi there.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, they make it hard enough with the Brexit passport queues. That's our punishment beating. We're going to have to, along with America and everyone else in the world, we're going to have to do our fingerprints and our iris and all that recognition stuff, which is going to take... It's going to be hours when we go to the EU for the first time when that comes in. And now we're going to have to pay an extra tax they're looking at. What sort of numbers are we talking about?
Well, so when this was first mooted, the ETIAS, which is the European version of our ETA, so when people come into the UK, they have to actually have a visa. It's not a visa, it's a permit to come into the country. Now, when it was first announced back in 2018, it was put down at €7, so that's about £5.80, and that would last for 3 years. So like an ESTA that you have to take out when you go to the States, it's €7. But the problem has been the fact that they have taken so long to bring in both the ETIAS system and the entry-exit system, which is the one that is coming in this October, that figure now seems pretty low. And like all of these governments at the moment, and it's not just the EU, it happens all over the world, they're looking at ways of actually making sure that they can claw back a little bit of money, and who better to do it from than from the tourists. So the basic idea is that instead of it being €7, this is actually when it finally gets introduced in basically the end of 2026, they're looking at increasing that from €7. It is worth bearing in mind that when we introduced the ETA, which is the same version as the EU one, but for people coming into us, when we made Europeans fill that in, which was from April of this year, it instantly rose from £10 to £16.
Okay, so we've done it too. It's a fair
we have done it as well.
I mean, I go to places like Egypt, and you know, it's 25 quid to get that visa, and you have to queue up at the airport and do it, the cash and all of that. I mean, so a lot of countries do that. It's a way of them getting their money back. The trouble is, a lot of these countries really do rely on tourism. I mean, Spain, for instance, we're their main tourism import, aren't we? We are a huge part of their economy. It does put people off.
It very much does. And actually, a lot of our big tour operators, the likes of Steve Heapy from Jet2 and Gary Nelson from EasyJet Holidays, they are really upset about the tourism taxes and how much they've gone up in recent years. So in Greece right now, if you stay in a 5-star hotel, it's €15 a day on top of your stay.
Because I know a lot of places, they'll say there's an extra charge per day and it's a local tax and you have to pay it. But that's usually like a couple of quid.
Yeah, this is a green resilience tax, and this is all about climate resilience.
Green resilience, backside. Come on.
Yeah, and it is a real concern for our tour operators because they can't build that into the price of the package holiday they're providing you with. That is something that you will have to pay once you get to the resorts. It's been introduced into Spain as well, and it is an extra cost that people really do need to keep an eye out for.
Well, exactly, and people were a lot of people budgeting for their hotel, budgeting for a holiday, and then there's suddenly this massive, not just a few quid, but a massive extra cost. And again, a lot of it when you're booking, especially online, it doesn't really show up, does it? That cost. There might be in the small print when you get the email after you've booked. But this is the thing. The countries want people to come as tourists to spend money because we turn up, we book a hotel, you get your taxis, you go to the restaurants, go to the bars, you do shopping, that keeps whole economies afloat. We know what the impact was on London when we didn't have tourists, either from during lockdown from around Britain, but particularly the Americans, the Chinese, people who come and spend big bucks. There is a very strong argument against doing that because if one country does it, another country doesn't, people go, well, I'll go to the one that isn't. It's cheaper.
And that's very much what could soon be happening. But also, apart from anything else, what really upsets me about this is it means that really you're pricing people out of the holiday market. It's no longer a democratization. You're not no longer... The amazing thing that that the low-cost airlines did was made it holidays for all. Anyone could travel. But now it seems that really it's a case of you're going back to sort of the grand tour days when only the rich could afford to travel.
But that's kind of what a lot of people who make these decisions want. That's why there was the eco tax this, and you should only be able to take one return flight long haul a year. They because they know perfectly well they can add extra costs, and rich people will still be able to do it. But people who will work all year so they can have that 1 week of a bit of sun and a bit of fun, and get the family together, that will be priced out of it.
Yeah, and that's the real shame of this. There must be a better way of doing it so that it's fair for all.
Well, also, I mean, people, taxes. We have taxes on lots of different things, and we're told, travel is a luxury. But you can tax the people going business class or on the private jets a bit more, can't you? But of course, they don't tax the private jets because the EU leaders use them so much.
That's very much the case. But, it is a case that, travel into Europe is going to become a little bit more difficult over the next couple of years. We've been talking about this entry-exit system
it's going to happen
for years, but it is happening this year.
They delayed it. They didn't want it to come in ahead of the Olympics, did they? Paris Olympics. That was France talking out of it. But what I find so frustrating is the fact that is the idea, are we going to have two separate queues? So people who've already been into France or Spain and Italy, and they've already done all the fingerprinting and the iris recognition or whatever, that they'll be able to go into a quicker queue, or are we all going to be stuck behind everybody who's arriving for the first time? We are talking about 4 hours standing in an airport queue at that point, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, to start with, it is going to be chaos because both the fingerprinting and the iris scanning will have to be done. After that, it will only be one of those two, and hopefully the e-gates will take some of the time out of that. But everybody will still effectively be in the same queue. We will still be in the non-European queue for those tests for the entry-exit system, because that's the bit that actually tells them how many days we are going to stay in the EU and how many days we've already stayed in the EU.
Well, or we just don't go at all. Bye-bye and see what happens then. They need our money. Lisa Minnow, travel editor at The Sun, always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much. We're going to talk to her a lot about that when that comes in divorce. Philip Ingram, it's very frustrating for people, but all countries do it. They add these charges on to make money.
Yeah, all countries do it. You go into the Middle East, you go into the United States, your fingerprints are taken the way through. It's the iris scan that'll take a little bit longer, but
But it's about most people haven't done it for Europe, and people just pop along. People go to a short haul holidays. It's their only holiday a year.
Exactly, but I don't think it's going to be as much chaos as people are making it out to be.
I think it's going to be worse. The worst bit is why won't they let people do it back in the UK? Why can't I get my queuing over and done, a couple of weeks
maybe
beforehand?
that's something to bring in the same way the Americans have brought in the so you can apply for it beforehand.
Get it done beforehand. Yeah, you're still in a queue for a long time at New York, aren't you? Oh well, first world problems, everybody. Anyway, Philip Ingram, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, as it always is. Joining us in the studio, also a pleasure.
Of course it is.
For his wife, because she's not at home. Ian Collins.
That's true. That's so true. It's fun. I just realised you were talking about the Irish. I think you said the Irish scan.
No, Irish.
I thought she said it. I thought Philip said it.
Do you know what? In my head, I kept hearing the word ISIS, which threw me a little bit.
You're not one of those scans.